They poured wine on
The
her
winners.
in front of 200
My
guests
God,
while she was 8 months pregnant. His mistress laughed. Her husband blamed her, and everyone in that room watched a woman be humiliated and did absolutely nothing. Grace Bellamy was supposed to be broken that night. She was supposed to go upstairs, cry herself to sleep, and accept that this was her life now.
I deeply
A
regret
trophy
my
wife,
actions.
a possession,
I know now that
a
what
woman
we
who
did was
existed
wrong,
only
and I
because her
have to take
billionaire
responsibility.
husband allowed it. But here is what Marcus Bellamy did not know about his wife.
She's absolutely
He did not
perfect,
know
Grace.
she used to
true
be
blessing.
an accountant. He did not know she had been watching,
Shipping is just
noticing,
getting high.
remembering every lie, every cruel word, every number that did not add up. And he definitely did not know that while he was downstairs celebrating with his
Y'all be
mistress,
proud of
Grace
me,
was
though. I've been
upstairs photographing the
organizing.
documents that would send him to
I've been
prison for
organizing
25 years.
today.
This is not a story about a woman who waited to be rescued.
I'm getting
This is
better.
a story about a woman who rescued herself, a woman who turned her husband's arrogance into his downfall, a woman who proved that the same skills
About
they
time.
dismiss as worthless
I know,
can
right?
become the weapons that destroy them.
That's what I said.
But the path from that wine-stained dress to that prison sentence, it was not easy. There were moments when Grace lost everything. Moments when her newborn daughter was ripped from her arms. Moments when she sat in a jail cell, framed
So
for
what are y'all
crimes she did
having
not
for
commit,
supper tonight?
believing it was all over. How did she survive? How did she fight back? And what was the one piece of evidence that Marcus never knew existed? The evidence
Burgers
that
and fries.
ultimately destroyed him. Stay with me until the end, because this story has twists you will never see coming. And the final revenge? It is absolutely perfect. Value statement. Before we begin, I want you to know why
Homemade.
this story matters. This is not just entertainment.
Go wrong with
This
that.
is a blueprint. Every strategy Grace used, every mistake Marcus made, every lesson
You know what
learned,
we're having
these are
tomorrow?
real
So
patterns
far, hot
that happen in
Cheetos.
real relationships every
Hot
single day.
Cheetos.
If you have ever
Damn.
felt trapped, if
know
you have
what we're
ever
gonna
been
have
told you are
tomorrow?
worthless,
I'm gonna do
if you
a
have
big
ever
old
wondered
honey
whether
ham
escape
on
was
the
even
smoker.
possible, this story is for you. The lesson is simple but powerful. The same
That's my
abilities
plan
that
for
helped you
tomorrow.
survive can help you fight back. You are not as powerless as they want you to believe. Now, let us begin. They say money cannot buy class, but it can certainly buy silence. In the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, some men believe they are untouchable. They believe their wives are merely accessories, decorations to be displayed and discarded at will. They believe that power and wealth make them invincible, that the rules governing ordinary people simply
Yeah,
do
and
not
I'll put
apply
all
to
the
them.
wires and all that
Marcus
stuff
Bellamy
in,
was
in
one of those men.
deal.
And tonight, at his annual charity gala in the Hamptons, surrounded by 200 of New York's most influential people, he was about to make the biggest mistake of his entire life. Grace Bellamy stood near the edge of the grand ballroom, her hand resting instinctively on her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant, her ankles throbbing in the 4-inch heels
was
Marcus
a
had
fun
insisted
deal.
she wear,
It started
because,
out
as he
fun,
put it that morning,
and it was like, oh man, this
while
is
adjusting his
actually pretty
cufflinks
cool.
in the mirror,
Man,
flats
you
look
fucked
lazy,
up, you're
and I
in
will not
trouble,
have my
boy.
wife looking lazy in front of my investors.
I think, what was it? The
You represent
front
the
end
Bellamy
of the
brand,
ship,
Grace.
Jane?
Try to remember that. She had wanted to remind
I think
him
it
that she
the
was
front
carrying his
end
child,
of the ship.
that her feet had swollen 2 sizes in the past month, that standing for hours in heels was not just uncomfortable, but potentially dangerous. But she had learned years ago that arguing with Marcus only made things worse. So she had nodded, slipped on the torture devices he called appropriate footwear, and followed him to the car like the obedient wife she had trained herself to become. The chandelier above her head was worth more than most people earned in a decade. It cast a cold, unforgiving light across the guests who had gathered to celebrate Marcus Bellamy's philanthropy.
Well, yeah, we
Crystal
need the
glasses
space.
clinked, Laughter echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Women in designer gowns air-kissed
That's
each
why
other,
I'm like, yeah,
while their
let's get rid
husbands
of
discussed
it.
stock prices
It was
and
fun.
golf
It was
handicaps.
cool. It didn't cost a whole
The event
lot
was
for
ostensibly
this
for
one. I think it
Marcus's
was like
Clean Water
40
Initiative,
bucks.
a charity that
I think this
supposedly
was like
brought
40
fresh water
bucks.
to developing nations.
I don't
But
remember.
everyone in this room knew the truth, even if they were too polite
I've
or
had it
too
on
afraid
display
to
for
say it
what,
out
about a
loud.
year now?
The foundation existed primarily to launder
Something
Marcus's
like
reputation and provide convenient tax write-offs for his tech empire, Bellamy Dynamics. The actual amount of clean water delivered to anyone, anywhere, was negligible at best. Grace watched her husband from across the room. He was handsome in that sharp, predatory way that had once made her heart race. Tall, athletic build, maintained by personal trainers and expensive
Also,
supplements.
guys, if y'all need
Salt
any
and pepper hair
pieces,
that made him look distinguished
hit
rather
me
than
up.
old. He wore his
Ever.
tuxedo-like
It
armor,
doesn't matter.
every line
Just
perfect,
hit me up.
every detail calculated. His eyes could charm investors out of
I do
millions
bulk
or
sales
freeze an
now
employee into terrified
on
silence.
whatnot, and I've
depending
got
on his
about
mood.
30 pounds of
5 years
Lego
ago,
coming in
she had been
next
an art
week.
student in Paris when the dashing American investor swept her off her feet. She had been sitting in the Louvre, sketching the winged victory of Samothrace when he approached her. He had complimented her technique, asked intelligent questions about art history,
Ideally, I'd
and
like to
invited
take
her
it
to
off you,
dinner
but
at a
I too
restaurant
spent half
she could
space.
never have afforded on
30
her student
pounds.
budget. He had been everything she thought she wanted.
Yeah, I got
Sophisticated,
30,
worldly,
actually, let's see, hold
successful. He told her she was special, that her talent deserved to be
42
nurtured,
pounds
that he would show her
42
a life beyond her wildest dreams.
coming in next week.
He had shown her a prison instead. The fairy tale rotted quickly, though Grace
Yeah, I
had
mean,
been
like I
too
said,
naive
I
to see it at
understand.
first.
It's not a real
The
big
controlling behavior
deal.
started
It's
small.
just I've got
Marcus
I've got
suggested
that
she did not
space
need
it's
to work
spoken
anymore,
for.
since he could provide for her.
I'm going
He
to
recommended she
actually,
distance herself from
I
friends
gotta
who were jealous of her
rearrange,
new lifestyle.
but
He
I
offered
think
to
I'm
manage her
going
finances
to
since she
put
was
my
an artist,
Disney stuff
not a
on that
businesswoman,
one,
and he did not want her to
'cause I don't
worry
have a
about
whole
such
lot of
tedious
Disney
matters.
yet,
By the time Grace realized what was happening, she was trapped,
and
isolated
it's
from
smaller.
everyone she had known before, dependent on a man who reminded her daily that she had nothing without him, and eventually pregnant with a child she already loved more than her own life. Tonight, clinging to Marcus's arm in the center of the room was not Grace. It was Victoria Shaw. Tori, as Marcus called her,
And
with that
if it
intimate
don't
familiarity
sell,
that
you
made
know where
Grace's
it's gonna
stomach
go,
turn
guys?
every time she heard it.
It's going
Tori
to the
was everything
Batcave,
Grace
baby.
currently was not. Sleek and slender,
Going
dangerous
to
in the way a beautiful weapon is dangerous.
Batcave.
Poured into a crimson dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent and left little to the imagination.
So if anybody don't
She was
want it
Marcus's
or
executive
whatnot,
assistant,
I get it.
though that title had become a
It's
cruel
neat.
joke
It's
months
a neat
ago
little
when the
build. It's
affair
not
became
really
impossible
expensive.
to ignore. Grace had found the first piece of evidence 7 months ago. A text message Marcus had forgotten to delete. Dinner was
It's
amazing.
just a tedious little
Cannot wait to
bastard.
taste more of you.
Don't miss
The initial
a
tea at the
step.
end had told her everything she needed to know. Marcus did not even try to hide Tori anymore. In fact, he seemed to enjoy the contrast. His beautiful, heavy wife relegated to the corner like an outdated piece of furniture, while his fiery mistress commanded his attention for all to see. It was a power play, Grace understood, a way of reminding her that she was replaceable, that he could discard her whenever he chose, that she existed only at his pleasure. Grace. Marcus's voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade slicing silk. It was not a loving summons. It was not even polite. It was a command, issued in the same tone he used when addressing servants who had displeased him. The conversations around them
But it
stuttered
is
and
neat.
died.
I give them
Heads
that.
turned.
They did a good
200
job
pairs
with it.
of
I
eyes
don't remember
fixed
the name
on
of
the pregnant
company
woman
that made
in the
this
white
one.
silk maternity gown. Grace felt heat
They did a good
rise
job,
to her
though.
cheeks as every instinct screamed at her to flee, to hide, to become invisible. But there was nowhere to go. There was never anywhere to go. She made her way across the ballroom, her gait slow and labored by the weight of the baby and the ridiculous heels. Her daughter kicked inside her, perhaps sensing her mother's distress, and Grace pressed her hand more firmly against her belly in a gesture that was half comfort and half apology. "I am sorry, baby girl," she thought. "I am so sorry I brought you into this world with him as your father." She could feel them watching Bosty her as she walked. These bankers and tech moguls and social climbers, these people who called themselves the elite. She could feel their pity, sharp and condescending. She could feel their amusement, barely concealed behind practiced smiles. She could feel their relief that they were not her, that their own marriages, however unhappy, had not sunk to this particular depth of public humiliation. "Yes, Marcus?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper when she finally reached him. She hated how small she sounded, hated how thoroughly he had broken her. Marcus did not look at her. He was still engaged in conversation with a silver-haired man Grace recognized as Senator Morrison, one of his most important political connections, but he gestured lazily toward the heavy oak table where bottles of vintage wine were displayed like trophies from conquered territories. "Tori's glass is empty. Be a dear
So
and
we
top
were
her
gonna
off."
build
The servers seemed busy tonight.
one of the
A hush
Christmas
fell
deals,
over the immediate
but
circle
I
of
seen
guests.
this laying over
The kind of
there, and I
silence
need
that
to get
happens when
called up.
everyone present recognizes they are
So this is
witnessing
what we're
something
gonna do
terrible, but none
today.
of them intend to
For
intervene.
right now,
Grace looked
we
around.
might
The
start
servers
one of
were
the
not
Christmas
busy.
bills.
3 of them stood idly by the wall, hands clasped behind their backs,
I have been
watching the scene
organizing for
unfold
the last
with
3
carefully blank
days in
expressions that could
here,
not quite hide their discomfort.
which has been pretty
Everyone
cool.
understood what this was: a deliberate humiliation, a demonstration
I'm
of power.
actually
The pregnant wife of a billionaire, reduced to
pleased
serving his mistress
with
like a common
my
maid. Grace looked at her
organizational
husband,
skills.
pleading silently with her eyes. "Please, not here. Not in front of all these people. Not when I am 8 months pregnant with your daughter. Please show me some small scrap of dignity." Marcus's smile tightened. The expression did not reach his eyes. It never did. "Now, Grace,
Guys,
do not be
I
difficult.
can literally
You know
move
how I feel
around
about
in
difficult
here
women."
and
The threat
not bump
was implicit,
anything.
How are you
but
sorting? By
unmistakable.
color, by part?
Grace had learned to
I'm
read
not
Marcus's
sorting
moods
this at all.
like a sailor
I'm just
reads
throwing
the
it in
weather.
a bin.
She knew when a storm was coming.
But
She
no,
knew when to take shelter.
I have
And she
been
knew that defying him here, in front of his investors
organizing
and
my
political
stuff.
allies, would result in
So
consequences
I
she did
organized all
not
my
want to
shipping
imagine.
stuff. It's all in one
Trembling,
spot
Grace
in
turned
a
toward the wine
deal.
table.
I
Her
organized
hands were
all my
swollen from the
single
pregnancy,
figs that are
her
on
fingers thick and
stands.
clumsy. She lifted the heavy
I
bottle of
organized all
1982
them. They're
Chateau
in one
Margaux,
spot.
feeling its weight strain her wrists, and walked toward where Tori
Yeah.
stood
I
smirking
just
like a
been
cat
organizing.
who had cornered a particularly pathetic mouse. Tori extended her crystal
But
glass
then,
with
like my
exaggerated delicacy,
bulk that I
her perfectly
sell,
manicured
yes, I
nails
sort it
catching
by
the
color.
chandelier light like drops of blood. "Careful, honey." Her voice was sweet poison, pitched just loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear.
All right.
"Do not
Now
strain
the lights
yourself.
are out
We would
of
not
the
want anything to
way.
happen to the precious cargo, now would we?" A few people nearby tittered nervously at the joke. Grace felt her face burn with shame. She poured the wine. Her hand shook, the dark liquid swirling into the glass like something alive. She stopped when it was full, exhaling a breath she had not realized she was holding. She started to pull away, to retreat back to her corner, to survive another moment in this endless nightmare. Oops. It happened in slow motion, the way terrible moments always do. Tori did not trip. She did not stumble. She did not even pretend to lose her balance. She simply flicked her wrist with a casual, practiced motion, as deliberate as a conductor's baton. The wine launched from the glass in a dark red arc. It splashed violently across Grace's chest and stomach. soaking instantly into the white silk of her maternity gown. Against the pale fabric, it looked horrifyingly like blood, like someone had opened a wound directly over her heart. Grace gasped, the shock of the cold liquid against her skin combining with the shock of the moment to steal her breath entirely. The heavy bottle slipped from her nerveless fingers and shattered on the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. Wine spread across the pristine surface, mingling with broken glass, creating a scene that looked almost like a crime had been committed, because a crime had been committed. Just not the kind that left evidence you could photograph. You clumsy cow.
I'm gonna turn him
Marcus's
down.
roar
I just wanna
silenced the
see what
entire
his stuff
ballroom.
runs for.
Every
I'm not
head
buying.
turned. Every conversation stopped. 200 people watched as Marcus Bellamy publicly berated his pregnant wife. But he was not yelling at Tori. He was yelling at Grace. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them in 3 quick strides, and grabbed Grace's arm. His fingers dug in hard enough to leave bruises, though
Damn,
the
look
marks
at
would
that
not appear
naked
until
ass
morning.
photo, guys.
He had
can even
always been
see
careful about
fucking
that,
nipples in
always
that
made
one.
sure the evidence of his cruelty was hidden where only Grace would see it. That was a $3,000 bottle of
Damn.
wine, and you threw it on the floor because you are jealous? In front of my guests? In front of Senator Morrison? I did not throw it. Grace's voice cracked as she tried to explain, as she always tried to explain, even though she knew it was pointless. The wine was cold against her skin, seeping through the fabric to her belly, where her baby kicked in distress. She threw it on me. She did it on purpose. You saw what happened. Oh, please. Tori's laugh was a
Is that
bright,
the one that
brittle
had you
thing,
cursing?
designed to carry across the silent room. Marcus, honestly,
Yeah,
she
this
practically
is it.
attacked me. She is hysterical. Just look at her. You know how pregnant women get. All those hormones
Yep,
making them
it's
crazy.
getting tore apart.
This is exactly
It's
what you were
either
telling me
getting gave
about,
away
the
or
crowd murmured.
put
Somewhere
in the
behind her,
shop.
Grace heard a woman whisper, "Poor thing." But the sympathy was directed at Marcus, not at her. Another voice, male and smug, said, "This is why I never let my wife drink at parties." No one stepped forward. No one offered Grace a napkin or a
I thought
kind
it was in
word
the Batcave.
or even a glass of water.
Not yet.
They were all too
It ain't
afraid of
made it
Marcus
there
Bellamy's
yet.
influence, too worried about their investments and their political connections and their social
It
standing to risk his displeasure by helping his wife, his viow. Or perhaps they simply enjoyed the spectacle. Perhaps watching a woman be broken in real time was entertaining enough to justify their silence. Marcus leaned close to Grace's ear, his grip tightening on her arm until she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out, "Go upstairs." His voice was a whisper only she could hear. But it was colder than the wine soaking her dress. "Get out of my sight. You look disgusting, like a victim, and you know how much I hate victims." Grace pulled her arm free, a sob escaping her throat despite her best efforts to contain it. She turned and fled the ballroom as fast as her body would allow, the sound of Tori's laughter following her all the way to the grand staircase. As she climbed the stairs, one agonizing step at a time, she heard Marcus's voice booming behind her. "Apologies, everyone. My wife is having a difficult pregnancy. She has been a little unstable lately, as I am sure some of you have noticed. Please, do not let this unfortunate incident ruin the evening." The champagne is excellent, and I believe the jazz quartet is about to begin their second set. The conversations resumed, the laughter returned, the party continued as if nothing had happened, because to them, nothing had. Grace Bellamy was not a person to these people. She was just another piece of Marcus's property, a malfunctioning accessory that had briefly disrupted an otherwise pleasant evening. Grace reached the landing and collapsed against the wall, clutching her stomach as a sharp cramp radiated through her lower back. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her vision blurred with tears she could no longer hold back. "Not yet," she whispered to her unborn daughter, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, not yet. We are not safe yet. Just hold on a little longer. I promise I will find a way out of this. I promise I will protect you." The baby kicked again, softer this time, as if responding to her mother's plea. Grace looked down at the dark stain covering her dress. Against the white silk, it looked like a target painted directly over her heart and her daughter. And for the first time in 5 years of marriage, the fear that usually paralyzed Grace Bellamy was replaced by something else entirely. Rage. Pure clarifying rage. As Grace stumbled down the hallway toward the master bedroom, she did not notice the older woman who had followed her to the bottom of the stairs and now stood watching her disappear around the corner. Eleanor Vance was
I wonder how.
63
I can't
years
remember
old,
how many pieces
a survivor
this
of her
was.
own
Jane, do you
terrible marriage,
remember?
and the wife of one of Marcus Bellamy's board members. 25 years ago, she had worn a similar expression of devastated humiliation. She had fled a similar party. She had hidden similar bruises beneath expensive clothes and practiced smiles. But unlike Grace, Eleanor had eventually found her way out. And for the past 15 years, she had dedicated herself to helping other women do the same. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a business card, the same card she had carried for over a decade, pressing it into the hands of women she recognized as kindred spirits. Women whose eyes held that particular combination of fear and hopelessness that only victims of intimate abuse understood. Eleanor climbed the stairs slowly, her aging knees protesting each step, and slipped the card under the master bedroom door. On the card were 2 lines of text, a phone number for the Women's Resource Center, and 4 words that had saved countless lives. You are not alone. The master bedroom of the Bellamy estate was a testament to Marcus's ego and a monument to his complete lack of warmth. Minimalist to the point of sterility, decorated in shades of white and gray, that made the space feel less like a room where people lived and more like a showroom in an expensive furniture store. Abstract art that cost 6 figures hung on walls that had never displayed a single family photograph. The bed was enormous, custom-made, and felt like sleeping on a cloud. But it was a cold cloud. Everything in this house was cold. Grace stripped off the ruined dress, shivering as the air conditioning blasted against her wine-soaked skin. She stood before the vanity mirror, the same mirror where she applied her makeup every morning, and carefully concealed the evidence of sleepless nights and constant anxiety, and looked at the woman reflected there. She barely recognized herself. Dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could fully hide. Skin pale from months of stress and inadequate nutrition because her stomach was always too knotted with fear to eat properly. A body swollen with pregnancy in ways that should have been beautiful but instead felt like another form of imprisonment. And eyes. God, her eyes. They looked like the eyes of someone who had given up. Someone who had accepted that this was all her life would ever be. 5 years. That was how long she had been trapped in this gilded cage. 5 years since the art student in Paris had fallen for the charming American investor. 5 years since she had believed his promises of a fairy tale life. 5 years of slowly, systematically being erased until she could not remember who she had been before Marcus Bellamy decided to possess her. She had been so young when they met, 29 years old, full of dreams and ambition, spending her days sketching masterpieces in the Louvre and her nights imagining the career she would build as an artist. She had grown up in a middle-class family in Ohio, worked her way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, and saved for 3 years to afford a
Hello?
semester abroad in Paris.
Look,
Meeting Marcus had felt like
I'm
fate,
just
like the
sorting
universe was
pieces
rewarding her years of
live.
hard
Wow,
work
what's up?
and sacrifice with a love story worthy of a novel. He had been so attentive in those early days, so interested in her thoughts, her dreams, her art. He had flown her to Venice for their first anniversary and hired a
No, I
private
mean,
guide to
maybe, I
show her the
guess. I don't
Renaissance
know.
masterpieces she had only seen in books.
Okay.
He had told her she was brilliant, talented,
Oh,
destined
yeah.
for greatness, but the compliments had slowly transformed into criticisms. The guidance had become control. The fairy tale prince had revealed himself to be a dragon in disguise, and by the time
Nice.
Grace understood what was happening, she was already locked in his
That
tower
sounds like
with no way
fun.
out. It happened gradually, the way abuse always does. First, he convinced her that her friends in Paris
Now,
were jealous of her new wealthy
yeah.
lifestyle, that they were using her, that she
I
was
am
better off without
alive.
people who could not celebrate her success. Then he moved her to New York, thousands of miles from anyone who might have noticed the changes in
Alright.
her, who might have
Well,
asked uncomfortable questions about the light fading from her eyes. He took over her
have a
finances
good
completely,
one.
explaining that as an artist, she should not have to worry about such tedious matters as bank accounts and credit cards. He decided what she wore, what she ate, where she went, who she spoke to. He convinced her to give up her art because it was taking time away from their relationship, time she should be spending making him happy. By the time Grace realized she was trapped, it was too late to escape. She had no money of her own, no friends who had not been systematically alienated, no family nearby who could help. And then she discovered she was pregnant, and the cage door slammed shut completely. She walked into the bathroom and turned on the shower, cranking the heat until steam filled the room. She scrubbed the wine from her skin with a ferocity that bordered on violence, as if she could wash away not just the stain, but everything it represented. Her skin turned red from the heat and the friction, but she kept scrubbing until the water ran clear. The cramping had subsided, but the humiliation burned hotter than any shower could soothe. When she emerged wrapped in a thick robe, her skin raw and her eyes swollen from crying, she noticed something on the floor near the bedroom door, a small white rectangle that had not been there before. Grace crossed the room and picked it up, turning the card over in her trembling hands. Women's Resource Center, a phone number, and below it, 4 words in simple black text. You are not alone. She stared at those words for a long moment, feeling something shift in her chest. Someone had seen her tonight. Someone had recognized what was happening. Someone had cared enough to climb those stairs and offer help, even if it was just a business card slipped under a door. Grace tucked the card into the pocket of her robe like a talisman, like a tiny flame of hope in the darkness that had become her life. Then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Voices in the hallway, coming closer. Marcus's voice, slurred with alcohol, and Tori's high-pitched giggle echoing off the walls. Grace had barely composed herself when the bedroom door flew open with enough force to rattle the abstract painting on the adjacent wall. Marcus stumbled in, his tuxedo jacket discarded somewhere, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. He smelled of brandy and Tori's perfume, a cloying combination that made Grace's stomach turn. Tori hovered in the doorway behind him, still wearing her crimson dress, watching the scene with barely concealed delight. You embarrassed me. Marcus's words were slightly slurred, but his anger was crystal clear as he pointed an accusatory finger at Grace. Do you have any idea who was at that party tonight? Senator Morrison, the entire board of directors, Jonathan Pierce from the venture capital firm, potential investors worth billions of dollars. And you. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You stood there dripping wine like some pathetic animal and made me look like a fool in front of all of them. She threw it on me. Marcus. Grace heard the steadiness in her own voice and was surprised by it. Something had changed inside her tonight. Some wall had cracked, and behind it was a strength she had forgotten she possessed. You saw what happened. Everyone saw what happened. Tori deliberately poured that wine on me. Do not! Marcus's
that
hand
cake
shot
is
out and
shit
grabbed her
on
chin,
that one.
forcing her to meet his eyes. Do not you dare blame Tori for your own clumsiness, for your own jealousy, for your pathetic inability to accept your place in this household. Grace jerked her chin free, stepping back from him. My place? Your place. Marcus smiled, and it was the coldest expression she
You
had
have
ever
inspired
seen
me
on
to
another
organize
human
my
being.
office.
You are my wife,
Yeah,
which means you do what I
really.
say, when I say it, without question. I do not
Yeah,
care if Tori
I
poured that
literally,
wine
wait
on
till I
you,
show
or if
y'all
God
what I've
himself rained
done.
it
It's
down from heaven.
crazy.
If I tell you to smile
It
and
looks
thank her
so
for it,
much different
that
in
is what you
here.
do. Do you understand? Grace said nothing, but she did not look away. Marcus seemed unsettled by her silence. He was used to tears, to apologies, to desperate promises to do better. Her quiet defiance threw him off balance, and she could see him recalibrating, choosing a different weapon. He walked to the nightstand and grabbed her phone, the one he monitored constantly through tracking software she was not supposed to know about. He tossed it onto the bed. Tori is staying the night. In the guest wing. I do not want you wandering around the house causing scenes or making my guests uncomfortable with your obvious instability. Your guests have all gone home, Grace said quietly. The party ended an hour ago. Did I ask for your commentary? Marcus's voice rose again, his temper flaring at her unexpected resistance. I am telling you how things are going to be. You will stay in this room until I say otherwise. You will not leave, you will not make phone calls, you will not do anything except sit here and think about how fortunate you are that I have not thrown you out on the street already. And if I do not comply? Marcus laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the laugh of a man who had never faced real consequences for anything in his life. If you do not comply? He walked toward her, slowly, deliberately, using his size to intimidate her. I will cut off your credit cards by morning. I will call my lawyers and begin divorce proceedings on grounds of mental instability, using tonight's performance as evidence. I will file for emergency custody of that baby the moment it leaves your body, and I will win because I always win. I will make sure you end up on the street with nothing. No money, no home, no child. Do you understand what I am telling you, Grace? He leaned in close, his breath hot against her face. I can take everything from you, including her. He pointed at her stomach, at the daughter growing inside her. Grace felt the words hit her like physical blows. But something strange happened. Instead of crumbling, instead of crying, instead of promising to be better like she always did, she felt herself go very still and very calm. I understand, she said softly. I understand perfectly. Good. Marcus pulled back, satisfied that he had reasserted his dominance. I am going to check on Tori. Try not to ruin anything else tonight. He walked out of the bedroom. She heard him speaking to Tori in the hallway, their voices fading as they moved toward the guest wing on the other side of the house. Then she heard the distinct click of the electronic lock, engaging from the outside. He had locked her in. Grace stood motionless for a long time, listening to the silence of the house settle around her. The muffled sounds of Marcus and Tori's conversation had faded entirely. She was alone, trapped, imprisoned in a room in her own home. She thought about what Marcus had said. His threats were not empty. She knew that from 5 years of bitter experience. He had powerful lawyers, powerful friends, a powerful reputation, carefully constructed to make him look like a pillar of the community. If he wanted to destroy her, he could. If he wanted to take her baby, he probably would. But Marcus had made a critical error tonight, in his arrogance, in his assumption that she was completely broken. He had underestimated his wife. Grace Bellamy was not just a former art student. Before she discovered her passion for painting, she had been something else entirely. She had been a corporate accountant, and accountants, by their very nature, notice things: patterns, irregularities, numbers that do not add up, details that others overlook because they are too focused on the big picture. Over the past year, as Marcus's cruelty increased and his absences grew longer, Grace had started noticing things. Late-night phone calls he took in his home office with the door locked, documents he shredded personally instead of having his assistant handle them, transfers to bank accounts she had never heard of, glimpsed on statements he did not realize she had seen. A second laptop he kept in a locked drawer of his desk,
Yeah, I don't know what
separate
we're
from the
gonna
computer
have
he
for
used
supper
for normal
tonight.
work.
Maybe frozen
She had not
pizza or
investigated.
something.
She had been too afraid, too beaten down, too convinced that she had no power and no options. But tonight, something had shifted. Tonight, watching Tori pour wine on her pregnant belly while 200 people watched and did nothing, something inside Grace had finally snapped. Not broken, snapped, like a bone that breaks but then heals stronger than before. She walked to the door, connecting the master bedroom to Marcus's home office. The lock was electronic, like everything else in this house, controlled by a keypad that required a 6-digit code. Marcus thought he was clever about security. He changed his passwords regularly, used different codes for different systems, never wrote anything down where someone might find it. But he was also arrogant. And arrogant men make mistakes. Grace had watched him enter this code dozens of times over the years. In those early days, when he still pretended to trust her, when he would work late in his office while she sat on the bed reading. She had memorized it without even trying. It was his mother's birthday, the same birthday he forgot to acknowledge every single year. She punched in the numbers. The lock clicked open. The office was dark, illuminated only by moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the manicured grounds of the estate. Grace did not turn on the lights. She did not want to risk alerting anyone to her presence. She went straight to his desk. The top drawer was unlocked. Inside, she found the usual detritus of Marcus's life. Business cards from people he probably did not remember meeting. A Mont Blanc pen he had received as a gift from some sycophant. Breath mints, a charger for his phone, and a manila folder labeled personal. Grace pulled it out with trembling hands and opened it. Her breath caught in her throat before she finished the first page. It was a divorce strategy document, dated 2 weeks ago, prepared by the law firm of Harrison, Blake and Associates, the most ruthless family law practice in New York. Marcus had hired lawyers that celebrities used to destroy their exes. Lawyers who never lost. The document outlined Marcus's plan in clinical, devastating detail. He would file for divorce on grounds of mental instability, citing Grace's erratic behavior, emotional outbursts, and documented episodes of hysteria as evidence that she was unfit to care for a child. Tonight's wine incident was specifically mentioned as a potential exhibit, with a note to secure witness statements from at least 10 guests. He would seek full custody of the baby immediately after birth, arguing that Grace's instability made her a danger to the infant. He had already identified expert witnesses willing to testify that postpartum depression, combined with her existing mental health issues, would make her incapable of providing a safe environment. He would offer Grace a settlement of $50,000, $50,000 out of his $2 billion fortune, less than he spent on his car collection in a single year. In exchange for this pittance, she would sign a strict non-disclosure agreement preventing her from ever speaking about the marriage, ever discussing Marcus's behavior, ever telling their daughter what her father had really been like. There was more. Character witnesses who had already agreed to testify to Grace's instability, a timeline that began with the baby's due date, detailed plans for managing the press coverage, to ensure Marcus emerged as the sympathetic victim of a troubled wife. And then Grace found the note attached to the final page. She recognized Tori's handwriting immediately, the same loopy, girlish script she had seen on birthday cards and holiday greetings that Tori had the audacity to send to the house. Once the baby is born, I will be the perfect stepmother. We can finally be together publicly without her hanging over our heads. I already have ideas for the nursery. Cannot wait to start our real life. Love always, T. Grace read the note 3 times. Then she read it a 4th time, waiting for the devastation to hit. It did not come. Instead, she felt something cold and hard crystallize in her chest. Something that had been forming for months, maybe years, finally taking solid shape. They were planning to take her daughter. Not just divorce her, not just throw her out. They were going to steal her child and raise her with Tori as her mother. They had been planning it for weeks, probably months. Every humiliation, every cruel word, every public embarrassment had been calculated. Building a narrative, creating evidence, setting the stage for a custody battle
Damn, I have
that
to
Grace
admit,
was designed to
taking
lose,
these
and she had
apart
almost let them win. Grace photographed every
is
page of the document
crazy.
with her phone, the one Marcus thought he controlled completely, but which she had learned to use in ways he did not monitor. Then she put the folder back exactly as she had found it and continued searching. The locked drawer of his desk required a key, but Grace had discovered months ago that Marcus kept a spare key taped to the underside of his desk chair. He had shown her once, during a rare moment of openness, explaining that he could never remember where he put the original. Another mistake born of arrogance. She retrieved the key and opened the drawer.
Damn, that went all the way
Inside was
over
the
in my
second laptop
desk.
she had noticed him using. She did not have time to access it tonight, not without risking getting caught. But there was something else, something smaller, a USB drive labeled insurance. Grace turned the small device over in her hands. Insurance. The word implied something valuable, something worth protecting, something that could be used as a leverage. She pocketed the drive without hesitation. She relocked the drawer, returned the key to its hiding place, and made her way back to the bedroom. The whole excursion had taken less than 20 minutes. Marcus was still with Tori. The house was still silent. Grace sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the business card Eleanor Vance had slipped under her door. Women's Resource Center. Tomorrow she would call that number. Tomorrow she would start building her escape plan. Tomorrow she would begin the process of destroying the man who had tried to destroy her. But tonight, Grace Bellamy looked down at her pregnant belly and made a promise. "They will not take you from me," she whispered to her daughter. "Do you hear me? They think I am just decoration. They think I am stupid and weak and broken. They think I will lie down and let them walk over me." She touched the USB drive in her pocket. They have no idea who they are dealing with. 3 days after the wine incident, Grace Bellamy sat in a cramped office in downtown Manhattan that smelled of coffee grounds and old paper files. The Women's Resource Center occupied the 4th floor of a building that had seen better decades, tucked between a tax preparation service and a dentist's office in a neighborhood where the rent was still affordable because the amenities were minimal. But the woman sitting across from Grace radiated a competence and controlled fury that no amount of expensive office decor could have matched. Sandra Brooks was 52 years old, with silver streaked
Hey,
hair
Shannon.
she wore in a practical bob and the kind of sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 25 years practicing family law, the last 15 specializing exclusively in cases where wealthy, powerful husbands tried to steamroll their wives into submission. She was known in legal circles as the closer, a nickname earned through a 94% success rate in custody battles that other lawyers considered unwinnable. She had seen everything, done everything, won against opponents who had unlimited resources and armies of attorneys. And right now she was reading the divorce strategy document Grace had photographed with an expression that grew grimmer with each page. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Sandra set down her phone, where she had been viewing the images, and leaned forward in her chair. Your husband has been planning this divorce for at least 2 weeks. He intends to claim you are mentally unstable. He has hired expert witnesses who have never met you to testify about your mental state. He is going to seek full custody of your unborn child, and his mistress has already been positioning herself as a replacement mother. Yes. Grace's voice did not waver. She had spent 3 days preparing for this meeting, crying out all her tears in private so she could present her case with the clarity it deserved. That is exactly what the documents show. Sandra removed her reading glasses and studied Grace with renewed interest. Mrs. Bellamy, I have seen your husband's type 100 times. They think money is the ultimate weapon. They think they can buy judges, buy witnesses, buy whatever outcome they want. They hire the most expensive lawyers and assume that alone guarantees victory. She paused, her expression hardening. They are usually right. Grace felt her heart sink. If even this woman, this renowned fighter for abused women, thought Marcus would win, then what hope did she have? But Sandra was not finished. They are usually right because their wives come to me too late, after the husband has already filed, after the narrative has been set, after the evidence has been manufactured and the witnesses have been coached. By then, we are playing defense, and defense rarely wins these battles. She picked up the phone again, scrolling through the images. You, Mrs. Bellamy, have done something your husband did not anticipate. You found his playbook before he could use it. You know his strategy. You know his timeline. You know exactly what weapons he plans to deploy against you. That changes everything. Grace leaned forward. So, you can help me? I can do more than help you. Sandra's smile was thin and sharp, like the edge of a blade. I can destroy him, but only if you are willing to fight. Really fight. Not just defend yourself, but go on the offense. Are you prepared for that? Yes. Even if it gets ugly, even if he retaliates, even if things get worse before they get better. Grace thought about the wine soaking through her dress, about the click of the lock trapping her in her own bedroom, about the words that haunted her every waking moment. You exist because I allow it. I have been living in worse for 5 years, Grace said quietly. I am ready for whatever it takes to protect my daughter. Sandra nodded, a flicker of approval crossing her face. Good answer. Now, let us talk about this USB drive you mentioned. She held out her hand. May I see it? Grace pulled the small device from her purse and handed it over. I have not looked at what is on it yet. I was afraid to use any computer Marcus might be monitoring. He tracks everything. My phone, my email, the house computers. I did not want to risk him finding out I had taken it. Smart? Sandra nodded approvingly. That is exactly the kind of caution that wins cases. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a laptop that looked several years old and deliberately nondescript. This machine is completely clean. No internet connection, no tracking software, no link to any network that could be compromised. I use it specifically for situations like this. She inserted the USB drive and began navigating through the files. Grace watched Sandra's face as she clicked through folder after folder. The lawyer's expression, already grim, grew increasingly dark. Mrs. Bellamy, Sandra said, finally, her voice carefully controlled. Do you know what backdating stock options means? Grace nodded slowly. It means changing the date on stock option grants to make them more valuable. Essentially giving someone compensation they did not actually earn at the time they are claiming they earned it. It is securities fraud. Exactly. Sandra turned the laptop so Grace could see the screen, which displayed a spreadsheet filled with dates and numbers and corporate codes. Your husband has been doing it systematically for at least 3 years. These documents show that he has granted himself and key executives millions of dollars in illegally dated options. The SEC would be very interested in these records. She opened another folder, and this is even worse. These are records of shell companies, fake invoices, wire transfers to offshore accounts. Your husband has not just been cheating on his stock options, he has been embezzling directly from Bellamy Dynamics, from his own company, from the defense contracts that account for 40% of his revenue. Grace stared at the screen, the numbers swimming before her eyes. She had known Marcus was cruel. She had known he was dishonest. But this was something else entirely. How much? She asked. Conservatively, Sandra scrolled through more documents. At least $20 million over the past 4 years. Possibly more. These are just the transactions I can trace in the first 5 minutes. A proper forensic analysis would likely reveal much more. She clicked on the third folder, and her expression shifted from grim to genuinely shocked. Mrs. Bellamy,
I
what
just
is your
bought
husband's
one of
email
these.
password? I do not know. Grace shook her head. He never shared that with me. Why? Because this folder contains what appear to be his personal emails. Sandra's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. And if these are real, your situation just became much more complicated. She turned the laptop back toward herself and began reading, her lips moving silently. After several minutes, she looked up at Grace with an expression that was equal parts fury and triumph. Your husband and his mistress have been planning more than just a custody battle. They have been planning to frame you. Frame me? Grace felt cold despite the stuffy warmth of the small office. What do you mean? According to these emails, they developed a scheme to plant prescription pills, specifically opioids, in your belongings. They hired a private investigator who was supposed to photograph you buying replacement pills from a street dealer after they had your real prescriptions canceled. They drafted statements for friends and family members claiming they had witnessed your drug use and erratic behavior. Grace's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs to stop the trembling. They were going to make everyone think I was an addict. They were going to manufacture evidence of addiction, then use that evidence to argue that you were a danger to your child. Sandra's voice was tight with controlled anger. If this plan had worked, you would have lost your daughter before she took her first breath. No judge in the country would grant custody to a mother with an opioid addiction, especially not when the father is a wealthy, respected businessman
Lord have
with a
mercy. I
concerned
think there's a
girlfriend,
million pieces
ready
in
to step
this.
in as a loving stepmother. She closed the laptop. Ms. Bellamy, I need to be completely honest with you about what we are dealing with. This is no longer just a divorce case. This is a federal case. The evidence on this drive could put your husband in prison for 15 to 20 years. It could bring down his entire company. It could destroy dozens of careers. That sounds like a good thing, Grace said. It is a good thing, but it's also a dangerous thing. Sandra met her eyes directly. Men like Marcus Bellamy do not go quietly when they are threatened. When he realizes you have this evidence, he will come after you with everything he has. Money, lawyers, private investigators, media manipulation, possibly worse. You need to understand that before we proceed. Worse? What do you mean by worse? Sandra hesitated, as if weighing how much to say. I have had clients whose husbands hired people to intimidate them, to vandalize their property, to threaten their families. In one case, a woman I represented was followed for 6 months by men her husband had hired, just to make her paranoid enough to seem unstable. In another case, a client's car was tampered with. She survived, but barely. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. She had known Marcus was capable of cruelty. But this? Would he really go that far? Yes. Sandra seemed to read her thoughts. He would. Men with that much to lose do not play by rules. They play to win. And winning, for them, means destroying anyone who threatens their power. She leaned forward, her voice softening slightly. So, I need to ask you again, Mrs. Bellamy, are you prepared for this? Really, truly prepared? Because once we start down this road,
Hey,
there is
Shannon,
no going back. Marcus will know you are fighting
you
him.
want
He
to
will
do
escalate.
like frozen pizza
Things will
or
get
something?
very bad before they get better. Are you still willing
I
to
said, do
proceed?
you want to eat a frozen pizza?
Grace thought about her daughter, growing inside her, depending
Do
on
you
her for
want to
everything.
eat a frozen pizza?
She thought about the life she wanted for that little
Do you
girl.
want to
A
eat
life
a
free of
frozen
fear.
pizza?
A life free of manipulation. A life where she would grow up
Alright,
knowing
soon
that
as
her
I
mother
get
had
done
fought for
tearing
her,
this apart, I'm gonna
had
start
risked
one.
everything to protect her. Yes? Grace's voice was steady. I am willing. Good. Sandra nodded once, decisively. Then here is what we are going to do. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing. First rule of leaving an abusive marriage. Document everything, but do not let them know you are documenting. Change nothing in your routine. Smile at your husband. Comply with his demands. Attend his functions. Let him think he is winning. The moment he realizes you are fighting back is the moment he becomes truly dangerous. She looked up. You mentioned you have not spoken to your family or old friends in years. Is there anyone you trust? Anyone who might be able to help? Grace thought for a moment. My college roommate, Diane Mitchell. We lost touch after I married Marcus. He convinced me she was jealous, that I did not need friends from my old life. But before that, she was my closest friend. We told each other everything. Where is she now? Last I heard, she was working at the IRS. She became a forensic accountant. She was always brilliant with numbers. Sandra's eyebrows rose. A forensic accountant at the IRS. That could be very useful. Federal agencies have been trying to investigate men like Marcus Bellamy for years. But they can never get inside. They never find anyone willing to cooperate. You, Mrs. Bellamy, are inside. You have access to his home, his office, his personal files. You could be the key they have been looking for. You want me to be an informant? I want you to be smart. Sandra set down her pen. The divorce case is important. Getting custody of your daughter is the priority. But if we can coordinate with federal investigators, if we can build a criminal case at the same time as the civil case, Marcus will be fighting a war on two fronts. He will not have the resources or the focus to effectively fight either. Grace considered this. It made sense. Marcus was powerful, but his power depended on maintaining control of every situation. If he was facing SEC investigations and FBI inquiries and IRS audits, at the same time as a contentious divorce, his attention would be split. His resources would be stretched. His carefully constructed narrative would start to crumble. How long do we need? Grace asked. To build the case? 6 weeks, maybe 8. Sandra tapped her pen against the legal pad. Enough time for you to have the baby safely. Enough time for us to gather additional evidence. Enough time for the federal agencies to prepare their warrants. And in the meantime, I just go home and pretend everything is normal? Exactly. You go home. You smile. You attend his parties. You let him think you are completely under his control. And every chance you get, you gather more evidence. Photograph documents. Record conversations if you can do so safely. Note names and dates and details. She stood up and extended her hand. Mrs. Bellamy, your husband thought you were just decoration. He thought you were a possession he could discard and replace at his convenience. Let us show him what happens when the decoration fights back. Grace shook Sandra's hand firmly. Call me Grace. Mrs. Bellamy is his wife. I do not intend to be that person much longer. The coffee shop in Midtown Manhattan was deliberately unremarkable. Generic exposed brick walls, mass-produced artwork that aspired to bohemian charm, baristas with ironic tattoos who called out orders with practiced disinterest. It was the kind of place where hundreds of meetings happened every day without anyone remembering them afterward. Grace had chosen it specifically because it was the opposite of anywhere Marcus would think to look for her. He frequented establishments with wine lists and dress codes, not coffee shops that served their lattes in paper cups. She arrived 15 minutes early, selected a table in the back corner where she could see the entrance, and ordered a decaf because caffeine was bad for the baby. Then she waited, her heart pounding despite her best efforts to remain calm. She had not spoken to Diane Mitchell in 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of unreturned phone calls and unanswered emails that Grace had blamed on Diane's jealousy because that was what Marcus had told her. But Sandra had helped her see the truth. Marcus had not isolated her because her friends were bad for her. He had isolated her because friends were witnesses. Friends asked questions. Friends noticed bruises and sadness and the
Damn, are
slow
we ever gonna
erosion
make
of
it?
a person's
Are we
spirit.
getting it?
Marcus had been
I
cutting
feel
her
like
off
it just keeps
from
growing.
anyone who might help her escape. Now, sitting in this anonymous coffee shop with her heart in her throat, Grace was reaching out for the first time in years. The door opened, and Diane Mitchell walked in. She had not changed much since their college days. Still the same sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. Still the same confident stride that made her seem taller than her 5'4" frame. Still the same warm smile that had gotten Grace through countless all-night study sessions and wine-fueled conversations about their futures. But the smile faded the moment Diane saw Grace up close. Oh my God. Diane slid into the booth across from her, her eyes moving over Grace's face with growing concern. Grace, what happened to you? You look like... you look... She trailed off, apparently unable to find words that were not hurtful. I know. Grace managed a weak smile. I know what I look like. I have not been sleeping well. For 3 years? Diane's voice was sharp with worry. Grace, the last time I saw you, you were glowing. You were so in love, so happy about your new life. I tried calling you dozens of times. I sent emails, text messages, even a letter to your house. You never responded. And now I see you, and you look like a ghost. What is going on? Grace had rehearsed this conversation. She had prepared explanations and justifications and carefully worded requests for help. She had planned to ease into the truth gradually to avoid overwhelming her friend. But sitting there, looking at Diane's face, at the genuine concern in her eyes, Grace found she could not maintain the facade anymore. Marcus has been hurting me. The words came out in a rush, like water breaking through a dam. Not physically, not usually, but in every other way. He controls everything. My money, my phone, who I see, what I wear. He monitors my emails and tracks my location. He has spent years isolating me from everyone I knew before, convincing me that my friends were jealous, that my family was beneath me, that I did not need anyone but him. Diane's face had gone pale. He has been having an affair for over a year, Grace continued. His assistant, Tori, he parades her in front of me constantly. At his last party, he made me pour wine for her, and she threw it on me in front of 200 guests. He laughed. He blamed me for embarrassing him, Grace. I am 8 months pregnant, and he is planning to take my baby. He has lawyers and experts and a whole strategy mapped out. He is going to claim I am mentally unstable. He is going to frame me for drug addiction. He is going to make sure I lose everything, including my daughter. She was crying now, the tears she had been holding back for days finally breaking free. And I let it happen. I let him do all of this to me because I believed him when he said I was worthless, when he said I had no power, when he said I existed only because he allowed it. Diane reached across the table and grabbed Grace's hands, squeezing hard. Stop. Her voice was fierce. Stop right now. You did not let anything happen. He did this to you. He manipulated you and isolated you and broke you down piece by piece. That is what abusers do. It is not your fault. Grace looked up, blinking through her tears. Diane's eyes were wet too, but beneath the sadness was something else. Something that looked like barely contained rage. That son of a bitch. Diane's voice was low and furious. I knew something was wrong. When you stopped returning my calls, when you disappeared from social media, when you missed my wedding without even sending an excuse, Marcus told everyone you did not want to see your old friends anymore. He said you were too busy with your new life, that you had moved on to better things. I never said any of that. Grace shook her head. He told me you were jealous. He said you resented my success. Of course he did. Diane's grip on Grace's hands tightened. Classic isolation tactic. Divide and conquer. Make sure the victim has no one to turn to when things get bad. She took a deep breath, visibly forcing herself to calm down. Okay, tell me everything. From the beginning. What do you need from me? Over the next hour, Grace told her everything. The years of control and manipulation, the discovery of the affair, the wine incident at the gala, the divorce strategy documents, and finally, the USB drive with its devastating evidence of fraud and embezzlement. Diane listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. When Grace finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. Grace, I need to tell you something about my job, about what I do now. Grace nodded, waiting. You know I work at the IRS. What you probably do not know is that I am part of a specialized unit. We investigate large-scale financial crimes, tax evasion, money laundering, securities fraud. The kinds of things that happen when very wealthy people think the rules do not apply to them. Grace felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Okay, my department has been trying to build a case against Bellamy Dynamics for 2 years. Diane leaned forward, lowering her voice. We know something is wrong with their books. The numbers do not add up. There are patterns that suggest systematic fraud. But every time we get close, Marcus's lawyers throw up so many roadblocks that we have to start over. We cannot get inside. We cannot find anyone willing to talk. She looked directly into Grace's eyes. You are inside, Grace. You have access to his home office, his personal files, his computers.
Did you watch
What you have
Stranger Things
already
yet,
found,
Legos?
the USB
No,
drive with
I
the evidence
haven't.
of backdated options and shell companies.
Have you?
That could be exactly what we need to finally take him down. You want me to help you build a federal case against my husband. I want to help you protect yourself and your daughter. Diane's voice was firm, and the best way to do that is to make sure Marcus Bellamy is so busy
Not yet. I was
defending
going to
himself
watch it while you
against
eating
federal
dinner.
charges that he does not have the resources or the attention to fight a custody battle. Grace thought about this. It made sense. It aligned perfectly with
I
what
ain't
Sandra
watching
had told
none.
her. My lawyer suggested the same thing, that we coordinate the divorce and the criminal investigation so they hit at the same time. Your lawyer is smart. Diane smiled slightly. Is she one of the Women's Resource Center people? Sandra Brooks. They call her the Closer. Diane's eyebrows rose. You got Sandra Brooks to take your case? She is legendary. I have heard prosecutors talk about her with actual fear in their voices. She believes I can win. With what you have found, with what we can build together, I believe you can win too. Diane squeezed Grace's hands one more time before releasing them. So, here's what I propose. You go back home, act normal. Keep Marcus thinking everything is fine. And over the next 6 weeks, until the baby comes, you gather everything you can safely gather. Photographs, documents, records of conversations. I will work with my team
Almost
to start
done.
building the federal case. When we move together. All at once. Criminal charges, divorce papers, custody motion. Hit him from every direction simultaneously. And if he finds out before we are ready, then we adapt. But Grace, the most important thing right now is that you do not let him know anything has changed. If he realizes you are fighting back, if he senses even a hint of resistance, he will accelerate his timeline. He will move against you before you are prepared. Grace nodded slowly. She understood the stakes. There is one more thing. Diane hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue. This is going to sound strange, but I need you to be careful. The men we investigate, the ones with Marcus's kind of money and power, they do not just fight in courtrooms. They fight dirty. Private investigators, intimidation, sometimes worse. I know, Sandra told me. Grace's voice was steady. I am not going to let fear stop me. I have been afraid for 5 years, and it has not kept me safe. Maybe being brave will work better. Diane smiled, and for the first time, there was something like hope in her expression. That is the Grace I remember, the one who moved to Paris on her own because she believed in her dreams, the one who never backed down from anything. I was starting to think Marcus had destroyed her completely. He almost did. Grace stood up, gathering her purse. But she is still in there, somewhere, and she is very, very angry. As she left the coffee shop, Grace felt something she had not felt in years. Purpose. For the first time since her wedding day, she was not just surviving. She was planning, fighting, taking control of her own future instead of waiting for Marcus to determine her fate. It would not be easy. The weeks ahead would be the hardest of her life. She would have to smile at a man she hated, sleep beside someone who was planning to destroy her, pretend everything was fine, while secretly gathering evidence that would bring his empire crashing down. But she would do it, for her daughter, for herself, for every woman who had ever been told she was worthless by a man who was supposed to love her. Marcus Bellamy thought he had won. He had no idea the war was just beginning. Lily Marie Bellamy came into the world on a Tuesday morning in late September, screaming with the righteous fury of a newborn who had strong opinions about being forced into the cold, bright reality of life outside the womb. Grace held her daughter for the first time and felt something fundamental shift in her universe. Every plan, every fear, every carefully laid strategy faded into background noise. All that existed in that moment was this tiny, perfect person in her arms. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a wisp of dark hair, eyes that would eventually
Dude, my
settle
fingers
into
were
a
so
color but
sore
were
from
currently
tearing
that
this
mysterious
apart.
newborn shade that could have been blue or gray or green. She is beautiful. The nurse smiled as she adjusted
This
Grace's
thing whooped
IV
my
line.
ass putting it
Do you have a name
together. It's
picked out?
whooping my ass
Lily.
taking it apart.
Grace could not stop staring at her daughter's face. Lily Marie. After anyone special, after hope. Grace thought about the lilies that grew outside her grandmother's house in Ohio, the ones that bloomed every spring, no matter how harsh the winter had been, after resilience. The nurse nodded approvingly and left them alone. Marcus arrived at the hospital 2 hours after Lily's birth. His excuse about traffic and meetings delivered with the casual ease of a man who knew no one would challenge him. He smelled of expensive cologne and, faintly, of Tori's perfume. He stood in the doorway of the hospital room and looked at his daughter for the first time. She has my eyes. He walked closer, not to embrace Grace or express wonder at the miracle of new life, but to inspect the baby like merchandise. Good. At least something about this pregnancy was worth the inconvenience. Grace bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him that he would never touch this child, never influence her, never have the chance to break her the way he had broken her mother. But she was playing a part. 6 weeks of smiling and complying had taught her the value of patience. She is perfect. Grace kept her voice neutral. The doctor says she is completely healthy. Of course she is. Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing. She is a Bellamy. Send me a picture for the press release. The PR team wants to announce the birth by end of business today. He did not ask to hold his daughter. He did not ask how Grace was feeling after 12 hours of labor. He simply dictated instructions and left, already speaking to someone on his phone about stock prices. When he was gone, Grace looked down at Lily and whispered, "I am so sorry you have him as a father, but I promise you, you will never have to live with him. You will never have to be afraid of him. I will make sure of that." The plan was set. Sandra had the divorce papers ready, the custody motion prepared, every
Yay!
document reviewed and
We're
revised
done.
until it was bulletproof. Diane had coordinated with federal prosecutors who were prepared to file charges the moment Sandra gave the signal. The SEC had been quietly building their case for weeks, using the evidence from the
bag it up here
USB
in a
drive
minute
as the
after I go
foundation.
get the food. So,
All they
wait,
needed
no, we're
was
not
for Grace
done.
to recover enough from
I
the
just
birth to
thought we
leave
was
safely.
done. We had a
2 weeks after Lily came into the
few
world,
sitting over
Grace
here.
woke before dawn. She fed her daughter, dressed her in the tiny outfit she had secretly purchased and hidden in the hospital bag, and packed a single bag with the essentials she would need. Then she carried Lily downstairs, walked out of the Bellamy estate, through the kitchen entrance that was not monitored by cameras, and got into the car Sandra had arranged to be waiting at the end of the service road. She did not look back. By 9 o'clock that morning, federal agents arrived at Bellamy
What are
Dynamics
you hollering
headquarters
about?
with a warrant. By 10 o'clock, Sandra filed divorce
What am I
papers
hollering about?
and an
I'm
emergency
almost
custody
done
motion
tearing this
citing documented patterns
piece of shit
of emotional
apart.
abuse and financial fraud. By 11 o'clock, Marcus Bellamy was served in front of his
I just
entire
killed
board of directors
Superman for like
during
the
a
30th
quarterly
time.
shareholder meeting. Grace watched from a safe house across the city, following the news on her phone, while Lily slept peacefully in a portable crib. The headlines were already spreading. Tech billionaire Marcus Bellamy faces federal investigation. Bellamy Dynamics stock plummets amid fraud allegations. Sources say CEO's wife has filed for divorce. Grace refreshed the page and saw a new photo. Marcus being led out of his own building by federal agents, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Even from a distance, even through the grainy quality of a phone camera, she could see the rage burning in his eyes. Good. Let him rage. Let him sputter and threaten and throw money at lawyers. He was fighting a war on multiple fronts now, exactly as they had planned. Criminal charges from the federal government, civil charges from his own investors, a divorce case that would expose every dark corner of his carefully constructed life. For approximately 36 hours, Grace Bellamy allowed herself to believe it was over. She stayed with Diane in her Brooklyn apartment, a comfortable 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where no one knew her name or her face or the empire she was helping to destroy. Lily slept in a bassinet beside her bed. Sandra called every few hours with updates that grew progressively more encouraging. The federal case was proceeding smoothly. Marcus's lawyers were scrambling, filing motions and demanding delays, but the evidence was overwhelming. The custody motion had been filed and would be heard within the week. Everything was falling into place. On the evening of the second day, Grace finally let herself exhale. We did it. She was sitting on Diane's couch, Lily nursing contentedly when she spoke the words aloud. I actually think we did it. Diane smiled from the kitchen where she was making tea. You did it. I just provided some helpful government resources. I could not have done it without you, without Sandra, without everyone who helped. For so long, I thought I was completely alone, that no one would believe me, that no one would help me fight him. But you all showed up. That is what friends do. Diane brought 2 mugs to the couch and sat down beside her. That is what women do for each other, when we actually pay attention and show up for each other. Marcus counted on you being isolated. He counted on you having no one. He forgot that the isolation he created could be broken. Grace smiled, the first genuine smile she had felt in months, maybe years. Then her phone rang, and the smile died. It was Sandra. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Marcus has filed an emergency motion. He is claiming you kidnapped Lily. He has requested immediate intervention from Child Protective Services. Kidnapped? Grace's blood ran cold. She is my daughter. I gave birth to her. How can he claim I kidnapped my own child? He is arguing that you fled with the baby without his consent, that you are mentally unstable and possibly dangerous. He submitted. Sandra paused, and Grace heard paper shuffling. He submitted a psychiatric evaluation. I have never had a psychiatric evaluation. According to this document, you have. It is signed by a Dr. Patricia Hendricks, one of the most respected psychiatrists in New York. It states that you exhibit signs of severe postpartum psychosis and represent a danger to yourself and your child. Grace felt the room spinning around her. This could not be happening. They had planned
did y'all
everything
know
so
where I got
carefully.
my
They had
BB-8
anticipated
from?
every possible response. But she had not anticipated this. Sandra, that evaluation is a lie. I have never
Y'all know
met
where
this
I got
Dr.
my
Hendricks.
BB-8
I have
from?
never been evaluated by
BB-8.
anyone. I believe you. But the court does not
No.
know that yet. And until we can prove the document is fraudulent, the judge may feel obligated
Where?
to act in what appears to be the child's best interest. What does that mean? It means
I got it
Child
from a
Protective Services
crackhead.
may be required to take temporary custody of Lily until the matter can be resolved. No. Grace clutched her daughter closer, as if someone might reach through the phone and snatch her away.
Nancy.
No, they cannot
A
take her.
crackhead.
She is 3 weeks old. She needs me. I know. I am going to fight this with everything I have. But, Grace, I need you to be prepared. If they show up with a
Crackhead
court
Gwenda are the
order,
best
you
law.
have to comply. If you resist,
I got it
if you
from a
refuse,
crackhead,
it will
for
only make
real.
things worse. It will make you look like
Fine.
exactly
I paid
the unstable,
30
Oh shit,
dangerous
tears of
person
joy,
Marcus
tears
is
of
claiming
joy.
you are.
For
Grace could not
real.
speak, could
I
not breathe.
paid $30
I am
for
so
it.
sorry.
It was
Sandra's
missing
voice
about
was
5,
heavy
10
with genuine
pieces.
anguish. I underestimated how far
And
he would go.
Every time I
We all
walk
did.
down here, I
The
see
phone
it.
went dead.
It's sitting right
Grace
there.
sat frozen on the couch.
I already
Lily still nursing
completed it,
peacefully,
but
unaware
it
that her
cracks me
entire
up
world
every
was
time.
about to shatter. Diane was staring at her with horror. What happened? What did she say? Grace told her. The words came out flat,
I need to
mechanical,
get
as if
my
she was
other-
reciting someone else's tragedy. When she finished, Diane grabbed her hand. We will fight this.
My bad. I called Nancy
There
a
has to be a
crackhead
way to
rolling on the
prove the
floor laughing,
evaluation
rolling
is
on the
fake.
floor laughing.
We will find the real Dr. Hendricks.
Damn.
We will expose the forgery.
Damn.
We will not let him win. Grace wanted to believe her.
How dare
She
you
wanted to
call
hold on to
Nancy
hope.
crackhead.
But the knock on the door came 2
You ought to
hours
be
later.
ashamed.
A woman from
Just for
Child
that,
Protective
I'm gonna eat
Services,
2 Reese's.
2 police officers, and a court order demanding the immediate removal of Lily Marie Bellamy, pending a full hearing on her mother's mental competency. Grace had to hand her 3-week-old daughter to a stranger who would deliver her to the man who had orchestrated this nightmare. The sound Lily made as she was carried away, confused and crying for her mother, was a sound Grace would hear in her nightmares for the rest of her life. Grace did not eat for 3 days after they took Lily. She barely slept. She sat in Diane's guest room, staring at the empty bassinet where her daughter should have been, and she tried to remember how to breathe. The darkness was absolute, total, complete. She had fought so hard, done everything right. gathered evidence, hired lawyers, coordinated with federal agencies. She had been smart and careful and brave, and still Marcus had won. He had forged a document and stolen her daughter and made her look like the crazy, dangerous woman he had always claimed she was. The news was already spinning the story in his favor. Troubled wife of tech billionaire removed from baby's care. Sources close to the family expressed concern for the child's safety. Grace had seen the headlines, had seen her own face on gossip websites, looking haggard and desperate in photographs taken without her knowledge, had seen Marcus giving interviews about his concern for his daughter's welfare, his voice dripping with false sincerity. He was winning, just like he always won. On the fourth day, Grace woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of voices in the living room. She had not heard the doorbell ring, had not noticed anyone arriving. She had been drifting in a fog of grief and exhaustion that made everything feel distant and unreal. She pulled on a robe and shuffled out of the bedroom and stopped dead in her tracks.
Add a crackhead
Diane was
provide a
standing in
grill
the
and
kitchen
table
making
for a
coffee.
barbecue for
Sandra
$40
Brooks
once.
was seated on the couch, reviewing document, and sitting in the armchair by the window, looking uncomfortable but determined, was an older woman Grace had never expected to see again. Ruth Bellamy, Marcus's mother. Grace stared at her mother-in-law for a long moment. In 5 years of marriage, Ruth had always been distant, formal, carefully neutral in the face of her son's cruelty. She had never defended Grace, never acknowledged the abuse, never once suggested that Marcus's behavior was anything other than normal. And now she was here, in Diane's apartment, looking at Grace with an expression that contained something Grace had never seen from her before: guilt. "What are you doing here?" Ruth stood up slowly. She was in her late 60s, elegant in the way old money is elegant, every hair in place, every accessory carefully chosen. But her hands were trembling, and her eyes were red-rimmed as if she had been crying.
I'm over here watching.
"I came to help."
Now. You over there talking
Ruth's
shit.
voice cracked on the words. "I came to tell you that I am sorry. And I came to give you the weapons you need to destroy my son."
Buying nothing.
Grace could not
He over
process
here
what she was
buying
hearing.
out.
She looked at Diane, who nodded
He's over here
encouragingly,
buying
then
out,
at Sandra, who was watching the exchange with sharp,
Steve.
assessing eyes.
I've been over here
"Please,"
watching
Ruth
this.
gestured toward the couch. "Sit down. What I have to say is going to take some time." Grace sat. She did not have
That's
the energy
funny.
to stand anyway. Ruth settled back into the armchair and took a deep breath. "I raised a monster." The words seemed to cost her something. "I have known it for years. I watched him destroy his first wife, a lovely woman named Catherine, who ended up in a psychiatric facility after 3 years of marriage. I watched him do the same to his second wife, Jennifer, who fled to another country just to escape his reach." Grace felt sick. First wife, second wife, she had not known. "And then I watched him do it to you." Ruth's voice broke. "I watched him isolate you and control you and break you down piece by piece. I saw the light go out of your
Something
eyes
smells
a
like
little
straight
more
up
each
shit.
time we met. And I did
Who's
nothing.
shitting
I
here?
said nothing. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of him." Ruth laughed bitterly. "My own son. I am afraid of my own son, Grace." He learned his cruelty from his father, who was equally terrible
Rolling
to
on
me.
the floor laughing,
And when my
rolling on the
husband
floor
died,
laughing.
I thought it would be over. I thought Marcus would be different without that
It
influence.
does.
Instead,
Yeah.
he became worse.
Which one of y'all shit?
He inherited all of his father's worst traits and added ambition to the mix. She leaned forward. "But I will not let him do to that baby what he has done to everyone else. I will not let my granddaughter
my
grow up in his
God.
shadow the way Marcus grew up in his father's. And I will not stand by and watch him destroy one
Alright,
more
let me see
woman."
if I got the
Ruth
Titanic
reached into her
thing.
bag and pulled out a folder of documents.
Alright, this is
This is the psychiatric evaluation Marcus submitted to the court. The one claiming you are a danger to yourself and your child. The signature on it belongs to Dr. Patricia Hendricks, one of the most respected psychiatrists in New York. Grace nodded. She had seen the document. It had cost her everything. Dr. Hendricks is also a personal friend of mine. Ruth's voice hardened. We have known each other for 30 years. She was the therapist who helped me survive my own marriage. So yesterday I called her. Grace's heart started beating faster. Patricia Hendricks never wrote this evaluation. Ruth opened the folder and pointed to the signature. She never examined you. She never spoke to Marcus or his lawyers about your case. She had never even heard your name until I mentioned it. This signature is a forgery. The room went silent. Grace could not speak, could not move, could not process what she was hearing. Sandra spoke first. Mrs. Bellamy, are you willing to testify to this in court? Yes. Ruth's voice was firm. Patricia has already agreed to appear as a witness and confirm that the document is fraudulent. She is furious. Her professional reputation is being used to destroy an innocent woman and her child. And you are willing to testify against your own son? Ruth met Grace's eyes directly. My son forged a medical document to steal his own child from her mother. He has committed crimes, destroyed lives, and violated every principle of basic human decency. Yes, I am willing to testify against him. It is the least I can do after years of standing by and doing nothing. Grace felt tears streaming down her face. But these were not tears of despair. They were tears of something else entirely. Relief, hope, gratitude. There is more. Ruth pulled out another set of documents. I have access to the Bellamy Family Trust. Marcus has been stealing from it for years, siphoning money into his personal accounts. These records prove it. She handed the documents to Sandra. I also have testimony prepared about Marcus's father, who established the pattern of abuse Marcus now follows. And I have names. Names of staff members who witnessed things they were paid to forget. Names of people Marcus threatened into silence. Names of anyone who might be willing to speak the truth if they knew they were not alone. Sandra was flipping through the documents with growing excitement. This is exactly what we need. Combined with the federal evidence, this creates a pattern, not just financial crimes, but systematic abuse, systematic manipulation, a lifelong habit of destroying anyone who stands in his way. Grace finally found her voice. Why now, after all these years of silence? Why are you helping me now? Ruth was quiet for a long moment, because when they took that baby from your arms, I watched myself 40 years ago. I watched my own mother-in-law stand by while my husband took my children away from me, used them as weapons against me, made me feel like I was crazy for even thinking I deserved better. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I survived that. But I have never forgiven myself for becoming her, for becoming the woman who watches abuse happen and does nothing. When I saw Lily taken from you, something broke inside me, something that should have broken decades ago. She stood up and walked over to where Grace was sitting. I am sorry. Ruth took Grace's hands in hers. I am so sorry I did not help you sooner. I am so sorry I let my fear keep me silent. But I am here now, and I am going to help you get your daughter back. Grace squeezed her mother-in-law's hands. She did not have words for what she was feeling. The anger she had harbored toward Ruth for years of silent complicity, the gratitude for her finally speaking up, the overwhelming relief that she was no longer fighting alone. There is one more thing. Ruth looked at Sandra. Something you should know about Victoria Shaw. Tori? Grace's voice hardened at the name. What about her? Ruth's expression shifted to something like grim satisfaction. My son thinks Tori is his loyal partner, his devoted mistress who will do anything for him. He has no idea that she has been stealing from him for the past year. The room went silent again. What do you mean? Sandra asked. I mean that Victoria Shaw has been running her own embezzlement scheme, parallel to Marcus's. Ruth's voice was cold with contempt. She has created fake vendors, submitted phantom invoices, skimmed payments from accounts Marcus does not monitor closely. She has stolen nearly $2 million and hidden it in offshore accounts my son knows nothing about. Grace stared at her mother-in-law. How do you know this? Because I have been watching her. I have sources inside Bellamy Dynamics who report to me. Loyal people who worked for my husband before Marcus took over. When I noticed irregularities in the books, I started investigating. I was originally trying to find evidence against Marcus. Instead, I found evidence against both of them. Sandra was already taking notes. This is incredible. If we can prove Tori has been stealing from Marcus, she becomes vulnerable. She has every reason to cooperate with us if she believes cooperation is her only way out. Exactly. Ruth nodded. She was planning to destroy him too. She was going to wait until she had enough money, then disappear and leave Marcus holding the bag for her thefts as well as his own. The irony is rather delicious if you think about it. Two thieves, each planning to betray the other. Grace looked at Diane. Something was forming in her mind. A plan, a possibility. If Tori is guilty of her own crimes, then Marcus cannot rely on her. Grace spoke slowly, working through the logic. If we can get her to flip, to testify against him, she destroys his narrative. She is his primary witness, his alibi, his partner in the scheme to frame me. Without her, his story falls apart. Exactly. Sandra was nodding vigorously. And if we can offer her a deal, cooperation in exchange for reduced charges, she has every reason to take it. I can get her the evidence. Grace's voice grew stronger. I can show her exactly what we know, what Marcus does not know, and I can make her understand that her only chance of surviving this is to help us bring him down. Diane looked worried. Grace, Tori hates you. She has spent a year trying to destroy you. Why would she help? Because she hates being poor more than she hates me. Grace stood up, feeling energy flow back into her body for the first time in days. And right now, she is about to lose everything she has stolen. Her money, her freedom, her future. I am not offering her friendship. I am offering her survival. She looked around the room at the women who had gathered to help her. Sandra, the legal warrior. Diane, the federal connection. Ruth, the family witness. And Eleanor Vance, who had arrived while they were talking and was listening from the kitchen doorway. The woman who had started everything by slipping a business card under a door. 5 women, all of them fighting for one baby. All of them ready to bring down a man who thought he was untouchable. Tomorrow, Grace said, I'm going to have a conversation with Victoria Shaw. The coffee shop in Soho was deliberately upscale. Exposed brick walls, artisanal pastries arranged like sculptures, baristas who discussed the origin stories of coffee beans as if they were fine wines. It was exactly the kind of place Victoria Shaw would feel comfortable in. The kind of place where wealthy Manhattan women conducted their affairs, both romantic and financial. Grace had chosen it carefully, neutral ground. Public enough that Tori would feel safe, private enough that they could speak freely. She arrived first and selected a table in the back corner, positioning herself where she could see the entrance and the exits. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, and carried nothing but a slim folder of documents. She wanted to look like exactly what she was, a mother who had lost everything and was willing to do anything to get it back. Tori arrived 15 minutes late. Grace had expected that. The mistress always wanted to establish dominance, to make the wife wait, to demonstrate that even now, even with everything falling apart, she still held some measure of power. She strutted through the coffee shop in designer clothes and 4-inch heels, her expression a mixture of contempt and curiosity. Her crimson nails caught the light as she pushed her sunglasses up into her perfectly styled hair. When she spotted Grace at the back table, she rolled her eyes dramatically before making her way over. This had better be good. Tori slid into the seat across from Grace without any pretense of pleasantries. I do not know why I agreed to meet you. Morbid curiosity, I suppose. I wanted to see what rock bottom actually looks like. Grace did not react to the insult. She had spent weeks preparing for this conversation, rehearsing every possible response, anticipating every attack. She simply opened her folder and slid a single piece of paper across the table. Do you recognize this account number? Tori glanced down at the paper. Her expression did not change, but Grace noticed her fingers tighten almost imperceptibly on her coffee cup. Should I? It is a bank account in the Cayman Islands. Grace's voice was calm, measured, almost pleasant. Registered to a shell company called Vertex Holdings. Over the past 14 months, approximately $2.3 million has been deposited into this account through a series of fake vendor invoices billed to Bellamy Dynamics. Tori's face went very still. The confident smirk faded. Grace continued. Vertex Holdings was incorporated using a registered agent in Delaware. The beneficial owner is listed as one Victoria Ann Shaw. That is your maiden name, is it not? You went back to using it for the shell company because you thought it would be harder to trace. The color drained from Tori's face. For the first time since Grace had known her, the confident, sneering mistress looked genuinely afraid. How did you get this? I told you the first night we met that I used to be an accountant. Grace leaned forward slightly. You and Marcus both forgot that? You thought I was just decoration, something pretty to display at parties and discard when it got inconvenient. You were wrong. Tori's eyes darted around the coffee shop, looking for an escape route, checking if anyone was listening. Her perfectly manicured hands had started to shake. What do you want? Her voice had lost its edge. Money? I do not have access to most of it yet. It is tied up in various securities. I do not want your money. Then what? Grace pulled out another document. This one was thicker, more detailed. Pages of transactions, dates, amounts. A complete record of Tori's theft. Marcus does not know about your little side business yet, but he will. My lawyer has prepared a complete report documenting every transaction, every fake invoice, every dollar you have stolen. The moment I give the word, this report goes directly to Marcus. And then to the FBI. Tori swallowed hard. Her hand trembled as she reached for her coffee, then pulled back without taking a drink. You do not understand. Her voice was barely above a whisper. If Marcus finds out I betrayed him, he will not just fire me, he will destroy me. He will have me arrested. He will make sure I never work again, never have a normal life again. He will ruin me completely. I understand perfectly. Grace's voice was flat, hard, because he has been doing it to me for 5 years. The difference between us is that you thought you were special. You thought being his mistress made you safe. You thought he actually cared about you. He does not care about anyone, Tori. He uses people until they are not useful anymore, and then he throws them away. You were never going to be the next Mrs. Bellamy. You were going to be the next woman he destroyed. You just had not figured that out yet.
Okay, what
Tori
are
was
doing
silent
wrong?
for a long moment.
I'm
Grace
gonna
watched
take
the
a
realization
picture
sink
now.
in, watched the mistress's careful facade crumble as she confronted the truth about the man she had betrayed everything for. What do you want from me? Tori asked finally. Her voice was small, defeated. I want you to testify. Grace laid out her terms with the precision of a closing argument. I want you to tell the truth about Marcus. The fraud, the embezzlement, the plan to frame me for drug addiction. I want you to confirm that the psychiatric evaluation was forged, that you helped him build the case to take my daughter. If I do that, I am admitting to crimes. Tori's voice trembled. I will go to prison. Maybe. Grace nodded. But if you cooperate, my lawyer can negotiate a deal with prosecutors. Reduced charges, minimal sentence, maybe even probation, if you are convincing enough on the stand. If you do not cooperate, you get nothing. Marcus finds out about your theft. You go down for everything. And you go down alone. Tori stared at the documents on the table. Grace could see her calculating, weighing her options, trying to find an angle that worked in her favor. Why would you help me? Tori asked finally. After everything I did to you, the wine, the humiliation, helping him plan to take your daughter, I ruined your life. Grace thought about that night at the gala, the cold wine soaking through her dress, the laughter ringing in her ears, the look on Marcus's face as he blamed her for his mistress's cruelty. She had every right to hate Tori, every reason to want her destroyed alongside Marcus. But hatred would not get Lily back. You did not ruin my life. Grace's voice was surprisingly gentle. Marcus did. You were just another tool he used, another woman he manipulated into doing his bidding. I am not offering you help because I like you. I am not offering it because I forgive you. I am offering it because my daughter needs her mother, and you are the key to getting her back. She stood up and gathered her folder. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires, and this information goes to Marcus. Think carefully about which version of your future you want to live. Wait. Tori's voice stopped her. Why should I believe you will keep your word? Why should I trust that you will not turn on me the moment you get what you want? Grace turned back. She looked at the woman who had tried to destroy her, who had poured wine on her pregnant belly, who had helped plan to steal her daughter. And she felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, recognition. Because I know what it is like to be trapped by Marcus Bellamy. I know what it is like to do terrible things because you are afraid of what he will do if you do not. I know what it is like to lose yourself so completely that you do not even recognize the person you have become. She paused. I am not asking you to trust me, Tori. I am asking you to trust yourself, to look at where you are and where you are headed and decide if this is really the life you want. Because if you stay with Marcus, if you keep covering for him, you are going to end up exactly where I was. Broken, desperate, with nothing left to lose. Grace turned and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. She was halfway down the block, her heart pounding, her hands shaking with the adrenaline of what she had just done, when her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number.
He's back.
5 words. I will do it.
I'm back.
When? Grace smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was not a forgiving smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just acquired the final weapon in her arsenal. Family Court of the State of New York. Judge Patricia Warren presiding. The courtroom was smaller than Grace had expected from watching legal dramas on television. No grand marble columns or soaring ceilings. Just wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly, and rows of uncomfortable benches that had seen decades of family disputes. This was not a stage for theatrical performances. This was a machine designed to process human suffering with maximum efficiency. Grace sat at the plaintiff's table with Sandra beside her, their notes and documents arranged in neat stacks. She wore a simple navy dress, minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back in a conservative style. She looked exactly like what she was, a mother fighting for her child. Across the aisle, Marcus sat with his team of 3 lawyers, all of them radiating the expensive
Are
confidence
selling that?
that came from billing
Yeah.
$800 an
I'm
hour.
moving it.
Marcus himself wore a perfectly tailored suit and an expression of wounded dignity. He played the role of the concerned father, being victimized by an unstable ex-wife with the conviction of a man who had convinced himself of his own lies. But the gallery behind Marcus was notably empty. The gallery behind Grace was not. Ruth Bellamy sat in the front row, her presence a public declaration that she had chosen her daughter-in-law over her son. Diane Mitchell was beside her, ready to testify about the federal investigation if needed. Eleanor Vance sat near the back, her weathered face calm with the patience of someone who had seen this movie before and knew how it ended. All rise. The bailiff's voice echoed off the wood-paneled walls. Judge Patricia Warren entered the courtroom and took her seat. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with gray hair,
Yeah,
sharp
I'm gonna
eyes
sell it.
that missed nothing, and a
Get it
reputation
out of here.
that preceded her.
I don't need it.
Fair but fierce,
And,
people said.
had to open
Follows
up a
the
little
evidence
more space
wherever it
for
leads.
other-
Has zero
others.
tolerance for wealthy parents who try to buy their way to favorable outcomes. We are here today to address the emergency custody order filed by petitioner Marcus Bellamy regarding the minor child Lily Marie Bellamy. Judge Warren looked at both tables over the tops of her reading glasses. I have reviewed the initial filings extensively. Mr. Bellamy, your motion was granted based primarily on a psychiatric evaluation indicating that Mrs. Bellamy poses a danger to herself and the child. Is that correct? Marcus's lead attorney rose smoothly to his feet. Yes, Your Honor. My client has serious concerns about his wife's mental state and her ability to provide a safe environment for their daughter.
I want y'all to be proud
The
of me.
evaluation was conducted by
I'm
Dr.
trying
Patricia
something
Hendricks, one of the most respected psychiatrists in New York. And her findings were deeply troubling. He paused for effect. We believe it is in the best interest of the child to remain in her father's custody while Mrs. Bellamy seeks the help
Good, but
she
that's
clearly
not
needs.
water.
Sandra was already on her feet before he finished speaking. Your Honor, we have evidence that the psychiatric evaluation submitted by the petitioner is fraudulent. The word landed like a bomb. The courtroom stirred. Marcus's expression flickered
Damn.
for just a moment before the mask of
Oops.
concern
Damn.
reasserted itself. That is a very serious allegation, Counselor. Judge Warren's
Have you
eyes
tried
narrowed.
water, lol?
I assume you can support it.
Have you tried water?
We can, Your Honor. Sandra's voice was calm and confident.
The hell?
We called Dr.
No?
Patricia Hendricks
What's water?
to the stand.
Nah.
The actual Dr. Patricia Hendricks entered the courtroom from a side door. She was a distinguished woman in her late 60s, silver-haired and professionally dressed, with the calm demeanor of someone who had testified in court many times before. She took the oath and settled into the witness chair. Dr. Hendricks, Sandra began, you are a licensed psychiatrist with over 35 years of experience, including 15 years as the head of the psychiatric department at Mount Sinai Hospital. You have been qualified as an expert witness in over 200 custody cases across the state of New York. Is that correct? It is. Sandra picked up the psychiatric evaluation from her table. This document bears your signature. It claims that you examined Grace Bellamy and found her to be suffering from severe postpartum psychosis and to represent a danger to herself and her child. Did you write this evaluation? Dr. Hendricks looked directly at Marcus as she answered, her voice clear and firm. I did not. I have never met Mrs. Bellamy. I have never examined her. I have never spoken to anyone about her mental health, and I have never been contacted by anyone representing Mr. Bellamy to conduct such an evaluation. This document is a complete and total forgery. The courtroom erupted. Marcus's lawyers were on their feet, objecting loudly. Marcus himself had gone pale. Judge Warren banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Your Honor, this is outrageous. The lead attorney protested over the noise. We received this evaluation through proper channels. If there has been some kind of mistake, it was not on our end. Then perhaps you should investigate those channels more carefully before submitting evidence to my court. Judge Warren's voice could have frozen the East River. Because right now, Mr. Bellamy's lead attorney, I am looking at what appears to be a forged medical document that was used to justify removing an infant from her mother's care. She turned back to Dr. Hendricks. Doctor, you are certain that this signature is not yours? Absolutely certain. I have examined the document thoroughly. While the signature is a close approximation of my handwriting, there are
Have you
several
ever
tells
tried
that indicate
water?
forgery. Additionally, the report uses my letterhead from 3 years ago. When I moved my practice to a new location in January of last year, I updated all of my materials. My current letterhead has a different address and phone number. Whoever created this document
Who
did not
drinks
know
water
about that
every
change.
day?
Thank you, doctor. You may
Which
step
one of
down.
y'all drink water every
As Dr.
day?
Hendricks left the witness stand, Judge Warren
I
turned her
drink on
attention to
average
Marcus.
of
Her
120
expression
ounces of
could have
water a
stripped
day.
paint. Mr. Bellamy, submitting
Damn.
forged evidence to this court is a very serious offense. It is contempt at minimum and potentially criminal fraud. Before we continue with these proceedings, I want to make it crystal clear that any additional misrepresentations will be dealt with severely.
Jane,
Do you understand?
no, you don't.
Marcus's
You
lawyers
drink whiskey
pulled him into a huddle,
every day.
whispering urgently. Marcus's face had gone from pale to red, anger replacing shock. Sandra did not give them time to regroup. Your Honor, we call Victoria Shaw to the stand. If the forged evaluation had caused a stir, Tori's appearance
I try
caused
to
an
drink
earthquake.
3 to 6 16-ounces
She walked
bottles a
through the
day.
courtroom doors, looking like a different woman than the one Grace had
Whiskey is
confronted in the
nasty.
coffee shop. Gone were the designer clothes and confident
Jane
stride.
over there hitting the bottle
She wore a simple
hard.
blouse and slacks, minimal makeup,
Ain't
her
she?
hair pulled back. She looked humble, contrite, cooperative. She did not make eye contact with Marcus as she walked to the witness stand. For the next hour, Victoria Shaw systematically demolished every lie Marcus Bellamy had told.
Nope, I work
She
tomorrow.
testified about the affair, confirming that it had been ongoing for over 14 months while Grace was pregnant. She testified about Marcus's cruelty toward his wife, the emotional abuse she had witnessed, the deliberate humiliation he had orchestrated at the gala. She testified about the plan to plant drugs in Grace's belongings and frame her for addiction. She testified about Marcus's instructions to make Grace's life unbearable, so that she would appear unstable when the divorce proceedings began. And she testified about the forged psychiatric evaluation. Marcus came up with the plan. Tori's voice was steady, matter of fact. He said we needed something official, something with a doctor's name on it that would convince a judge to remove the baby immediately. He paid someone, I do not know who, to create the document using Dr. Hendricks's old letterhead. I helped him edit the language to make it sound more professionally authentic. You helped your lover forge evidence to take a child from her mother? Sandra asked. Tori finally looked at Grace. Her expression held no defiance now, just exhaustion, just the weight of what she had done. Yes, I helped him. I am not proud of it. I was afraid of him, and I was in too deep to see a way out. But that does not excuse what I did. Nothing excuses it. Marcus was on his feet before his lawyers could stop him. She is lying! His voice echoed off the walls. She is lying because Grace paid her off. This is a setup. This is a conspiracy against me. Mr. Bellamy, sit down. Judge Warren's voice cracked like a whip. You will have your opportunity to respond through your counsel. Another outburst like that, and I will hold you in contempt. Marcus's lawyers pulled him back into his seat, their faces grim, with the realization that they were losing badly. Sandra called one more witness. Ruth Bellamy took the stand and testified against her own son. She spoke about the pattern of abuse she had witnessed across 3 marriages. She spoke about Marcus's father, who had established the template his son now followed. She spoke about discovering the forged signature, and reaching out to Dr. Hendricks to confirm her suspicions. She spoke, most devastatingly, about why she had finally decided to break her silence. Because I watched my granddaughter taken from her mother's arms. Ruth's voice cracked but did not break, and I realized that my silence had made me complicit in my son's cruelty. I could not live with that anymore. No mother should have to hand her baby to strangers. No child should be used as a weapon in a parent's vendetta. What Marcus has done is unforgivable, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. The closing arguments were brief. The evidence spoke for itself. Judge Warren did not need long to deliberate. I have heard enough. Her voice was heavy with controlled fury. Mr. Bellamy, you have attempted to manipulate this court through forged evidence, false testimony, and a systematic campaign to destroy your wife's reputation. You have wasted the court's time and taxpayer resources pursuing a fraudulent claim. Most egregiously, you have subjected a 3-week-old infant to unnecessary trauma by removing her from her mother's care based on lies. She paused to let the words sink in. The emergency custody order is hereby vacated. Full temporary custody of Lily Marie Bellamy is awarded to Grace Bellamy, effective immediately. Mr. Bellamy is ordered to have no contact with the minor child until a full custody evaluation can be conducted by a court-appointed psychiatrist. Furthermore, I am referring the matter of the forged psychiatric evaluation to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Bellamy, I have been on this bench for 22 years. I have seen wealthy, powerful men try to use the court system as a weapon against their wives more times than I can count. I want you to understand something clearly. It does not work in my courtroom. Custody decisions are about what is best for the child, not what is convenient for the parent with the most expensive legal team. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. Grace sat
Hey,
frozen
where's
in her
my-
seat as the courtroom emptied around her. It had happened. She had won. Her daughter was coming home. Sandra was saying something about paperwork and next steps. But Grace could not focus on the words. All she could think about was Lily, holding her baby again, feeding her, rocking her, whispering promises that everything was going to be okay. She looked across the courtroom at Marcus. He was surrounded by his lawyers, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. For a moment, their eyes met. Grace did not look away. She did not flinch. She did not shrink. She simply stared at the man who had tried to destroy her until he was the one who broke eye contact and looked away. Then she stood up and walked out of the courtroom to get her daughter. Grace had Lily back in her arms for exactly 14 hours before the FBI knocked on Diane's door. She had spent those hours in a state of blissful exhaustion, alternating between feeding her daughter and simply holding her, breathing in her scent, marveling at the miracle of having her back. She had fallen asleep with Lily in a bassinet beside her bed, one hand resting on the baby's chest so she could feel her breathing. The knock came at 6 a.m. 2 federal agents in dark suits stood in the hallway. They did not look apologetic. They did not look conflicted. They looked like people doing their jobs. Grace Bellamy? The lead agent was a stern-faced woman who appeared to be in her 40s. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit securities fraud and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. Grace heard the words from very far away. This could not be happening. Not now, not after everything she had survived. There has to be a mistake. Her voice came out strangled as she clutched Lily closer. I am the one who reported the fraud. I gave you the evidence. I cooperated with everything. Ma'am, the agent said, not unkindly, you can discuss the specifics with your lawyer. Right now, we need you to come with us. What about my daughter? Grace was starting to shake. I just got her back. She needs me. She is nursing. A social worker will take temporary custody until arrangements can be made. No. The word came out as a whisper, then louder. No. You cannot take her from me again. Please. Please, there has to have been another way. But there was no other way. The warrant was valid. The charges were filed. And Grace Bellamy was handcuffed in front of her screaming baby for the second time in a month. The sound Lily made as she was carried away again would haunt Grace's nightmares for years. At the Federal Detention Center, Grace was processed and placed in a holding cell. Her one phone call went to Sandra, who arrived within 2 hours looking like she had not slept in days. "What is happening?" Grace demanded the moment they were alone in the interview room. "How is this possible?" Sandra slammed a folder down on the metal table. Marcus made a deal with prosecutors. He went to them before the FBI could file their original charges and offered himself as a cooperating witness. He told them that you were his partner in everything, that you helped him set up the shell companies, manage the offshore accounts, orchestrate the entire fraud scheme from the beginning. That is insane. Grace's voice cracked. I did not know about any of it until I found that USB drive. He kept everything hidden from me. I know that. Sandra's face was tight, with barely controlled rage. But Marcus has been busy. He altered the metadata on the files from the USB drive. He created fake emails between the two of you discussing the fraud, backdated to make it look like you were involved from the start. He even found people willing to claim they saw you at meetings where the scheme was discussed. He is framing me. Grace felt the walls closing in around her, just like he tried to frame me before with the drugs. Exactly. And this time, he has more resources and more desperation. He knows if he goes down alone, he loses everything. His fortune, his freedom, his reputation. So he is trying to drag you down with him. If you are both guilty, the custody battle becomes irrelevant. Neither parent can claim moral superiority over the other. Grace stared at the metal table, at her reflection in its scratched surface. She looked like a ghost. A woman who had been beaten so many times, she had forgotten what victory felt like. Can we fight this? Sandra hesitated. That is not a good sign. A lawyer who never hesitated was suddenly uncertain. The evidence he manufactured is convincing, very convincing. He had time to prepare while we were focused on the custody battle. He covered his tracks well. So what are you saying? That he wins? After everything, he just wins? I am saying we need something he did not anticipate. Something that proves definitively that you were not involved. Right now, the case is a matter of his word against yours, with manufactured evidence on his side. Grace closed her eyes. She thought about everything she had been through. The years of abuse, the escape, the custody battle, the triumph in that courtroom. All of it had led here, to another cell, another separation from her daughter, another moment where Marcus Bellamy held all the power. No. She opened her eyes. Not this time, not again. The USB drive. Grace sat up straighter. The original USB drive I took from his desk. Where is it? Sandra frowned, in evidence. The FBI has it. Why? When I took that drive, I did not modify anything. I did not even look at what was on it until I gave it to you. I took it exactly as it was. Okay. Sandra still looked confused. What does that matter? Call Diane. Grace's voice was growing stronger. Ask her to check something for me. Ask her if the drive has a Write Protect tab. A Write Protect tab? It is a physical switch on older USB drives. Some of them have it. When the tab is engaged, nothing on the drive can be modified. The files become read only. It is a security feature for people who want to make sure their data cannot be changed or corrupted. Sandra's eyes widened as she understood. And if the drive had that tab engaged when you took it, then the files cannot have been altered after I took possession of it. The originals would prove exactly when they were created and by whom. If Marcus changed his versions, the timestamps would not match. The metadata would be different. Sandra was already pulling out her phone. If this works, if the forensic analysis shows that his version was altered after the fact, then he did not just fail to frame me. Grace's voice was cold and hard and absolutely certain. He proved that he tampered with evidence. He proved that he committed obstruction of justice. He handed us exactly what we need to destroy him. The forensic analysis took 48 hours. 48 hours that Grace spent in a federal holding cell, separated from her daughter, waiting to find out if she would spend the next 20 years in prison for crimes she did not commit. The results came back on a Tuesday afternoon. Sandra practically ran into the interview room. The drive had a Write Protect tab. Her voice was shaking with excitement. It was engaged. The FBI's forensic team confirmed it. The original files cannot have been modified after they were created, which was 3 years before you ever had access to Marcus's office. Grace felt the breath leave her body. And Marcus's versions, the ones he gave to prosecutors, created 2 weeks ago. Sandra was smiling now, a fierce, triumphant smile. The metadata is completely different. The file structures do not match. His versions are obvious fakes when compared to the originals. He framed himself. He did more than that. Sandra sat down across from Grace, her eyes bright. By altering those files and submitting them as evidence, Marcus committed additional federal crimes: obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, making false statements to federal investigators. The prosecutors are furious. They do not like being used as weapons in someone's personal vendetta. What happens now? Now, Sandra's smile grew wider. They throw the book at him. And you go home to your daughter. 4 hours later, Grace Bellamy walked out of federal custody a free woman. All charges had been dismissed with prejudice, meaning they could
I don't
never
know
be
why I
refiled.
started doing
The same
this
evidence
tonight,
Marcus
I'm
had
gonna be
manufactured
honest.
to destroy her had instead
I
destroyed
really
him.
don't.
The prosecutors, who had
I know I
arrested
need
her,
to get it done,
were now
but
building an even stronger case
damn.
against him, adding new charges to the mountain already waiting. Diane was waiting outside the detention center with Lily in her arms. Grace did not speak. She could not find words. She simply took her daughter and held her while the tears streamed down her face, and the New York traffic hummed around them. "It is over," Diane said softly. "It is really over this time." Grace looked at her friend, at the gray federal building behind her, at the city stretching out in every direction, full of people who had no idea what she had just survived. No. Grace's voice was quiet but certain. "It is not over yet. There is still one more thing I need to do. Federal Court, Southern District of New York." 3 months later. Grace Bellamy took the witness stand for the final time and looked out at the courtroom. It was larger than the family court had been, more formal, filled with the trappings of federal authority. The seal of the United States hung behind the judge's bench. The gallery was packed with reporters, investors who had lost money in Marcus's schemes, and former employees who had suffered under his leadership. And Marcus himself sat at the defense table, diminished somehow, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had grown gaunt during the months of proceedings. His team of lawyers had dwindled from 3 to 1, a court-appointed public defender who looked nearly as defeated as his client. The prosecution had been methodical, devastating. They had presented evidence of securities fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, and money laundering spanning nearly a decade. They had called witnesses who testified to Marcus's intimidation tactics, his manipulation of evidence, his systematic abuse of everyone who stood in his way. But the moment everyone was waiting for was Grace's testimony. Mrs. Bellamy. The prosecutor was a seasoned federal attorney named Catherine Walsh, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had spent 30 years putting white-collar criminals behind bars. You have provided extensive testimony about your husband's financial crimes, about the evidence you discovered, the documents you photographed, the USB drive you recovered from his office. But I want to ask you something more personal, if I may. Grace nodded. Of course. Why did you decide to fight back? The courtroom went quiet. 200 people leaned forward slightly, waiting for her answer. Grace looked at Marcus. He would not meet her eyes. He had not looked at her once during the entire trial. For years, she began slowly. My husband told me I was nothing. He told me I existed because he allowed it. He told me I was too stupid to understand business, too weak to survive without him, too worthless to deserve anything better than what he chose to give me. She paused. I believed him. For a long time, I believed every word. I think a lot of women in abusive situations believe those lies because the people telling them are so convincing. They break you down slowly, piece by piece, until you cannot remember who you were before they started, until you cannot imagine being anyone other than who they have made you. She looked back at the prosecutor. But then they threatened to take my daughter. They threatened to steal my child and raise her with his mistress as her
I
mother.
guess I'm
And
being
something inside me
proactive
snapped.
tonight, guys.
Grace sat up straighter in the witness chair. I remembered who I was before I met Marcus Bellamy. I was an accountant, a good one. I noticed patterns and numbers and things that did not add up. I had given up that part of myself because he told me it was worthless. But it was not worthless. It was the key to everything. She turned to address the jury directly. The same skills that helped me survive his abuse helped me fight back against it. I knew how to read financial documents. I knew how to trace transactions. I knew how to recognize when numbers did not match the story someone was telling. I just needed to start paying attention again. The prosecutor nodded. And what would you say to other women who might be in similar situations? Women who are being told they are worthless, that they have no power, that they cannot fight back? Grace thought about all the nights she had spent crying in that cold mansion, all the mornings she had woken up believing she had no options, all the moments she had come close to giving up entirely. I would say that the skills that helped you survive can help you fight back. Whatever you are good at, whatever talents you have that your abuser has tried to diminish or dismiss, those things are still inside you. They are still valuable. They can still save you. She looked around the courtroom, at the reporters writing furiously, at the women in the gallery who were watching her with tears in their eyes. I would say document everything, every cruel word, every threat, every moment of abuse. Write it down. Take photographs. Keep records. Because when you are ready to fight, that documentation becomes your weapon. I would say find your people. Reach out to friends you have lost touch
Vecna
with.
is like Freddy Krueger.
Contact organizations that help women leave abusive relationships. Build a support network, even if it is
Don't
just
be
one or two
telling
people
me.
who believe you. You cannot fight alone, and you should not have to. She paused. And most importantly, I would say this. Do not believe anyone who tells you that you are powerless, because you are not. You are stronger than you know. You are smarter than they want you to think. And you are capable of things you
Rolling
cannot
on the
even
floor,
imagine
laughing,
right
rolling
now.
on the floor,
The
laughing.
prosecutor thanked her
Are you a
and sat
Vecna
down.
fan?
Marcus's lawyer rose for cross-examination, but it was brief and ineffective. There was nothing left to challenge. The evidence was overwhelming. Grace's testimony was unshakable. And Marcus himself had provided the final proof of his own guilt by trying to frame an innocent woman and failing. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. The verdict came down on a Friday afternoon, with winter sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the federal courthouse. Guilty on all counts. 12 counts of securities fraud, 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of obstruction of justice, 1 count of evidence tampering, multiple counts of tax evasion and money laundering. Grace watched Marcus's face as the verdict was read. She had expected rage, denial, some final eruption of the man who had controlled her for so long. Instead, she saw nothing. His face was blank, empty, hollowed out. The realization had finally sunk in that his money and his power and his lawyers could not save him from the consequences of his own actions. The sentence came down 2 weeks later, 25 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 15 years. The judge called it one of the most systematic and deliberate fraud schemes she had
does
ever
your
seen,
mom watch
made
Stranger
worse by the
Things with
defendant's
you?
attempts to frame an innocent person to escape accountability. Marcus Bellamy was led away in handcuffs. He did not look back. Grace did not attend the sentencing. She was home in Brooklyn, in the comfortable 3-bedroom apartment she had purchased with her divorce settlement. She learned the news from Sandra, who called with quiet
She
triumph
like
in her
it?
voice. "It is done. He is gone." Grace thanked her and hung up the phone. Then she walked into the living room where Lily was playing on a soft blanket, surrounded by toys, gurgling happily at the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. She was 7 months old now. She had her mother's eyes, and thankfully, none of her father's temperament. Diane was there, as she often was these days. They had grown closer than ever through the ordeal, their friendship forged in fire. Ruth Bellamy had just left after her weekly visit, having become an unexpected but welcome presence in their lives. Eleanor Vance was scheduled to come by later to discuss the foundation they were creating together, a resource center for women leaving abusive marriages, funded by Grace's settlement and Ruth's considerable fortune. Grace picked up her daughter and held her close. "Your father is going to miss everything," she said softly. "Your first steps, your first words, your first day of school, your graduation, your wedding, all of it. Because he thought pouring wine on your mother was funny. Because he thought he could take you away from me. Because he thought he was untouchable." Lily grabbed a fistful of Grace's hair and tugged. Grace laughed, the sound surprising her. She had not laughed in so long, had not felt lightness in so long, had not believed that she would ever feel
The guy that
anything
plays Vecna
other
should
than
be
fear
considered the next
and
Freddy
exhaustion
Krueger. He would be
and
great.
despair. But here she was,
Oh, yeah?
alive, free, holding her daughter in her own home, surrounded by people who loved her. She walked to the window and looked out at the Brooklyn skyline. The city spread out before her, full of millions of lives and stories, full of other women who were right now going through what she had gone through.
Yes.
Women who believed they were trapped, women who believed they were worthless, women who believed they had no way out. She hoped her story would reach them somehow, that they would hear about the accountant who brought down a billionaire with nothing but evidence and determination and the help of women who refused to let her fight alone. On the coffee table sat a bottle of wine, not Chateau Margaux, not some rare vintage worth thousands of dollars. A $5 bottle from the grocery store around the corner. Grace poured herself a glass with one hand, still holding Lily with the other. "To everyone who told me I was worthless," she raised the glass to the city outside her window. "You were wrong." She took a sip. The wine was cheap, unremarkable, nothing special at all. It tasted like victory. The letter arrived 3 weeks later. Grace recognized the handwriting immediately. The envelope had been processed through the federal prison mail system, stamped and inspected and delayed by bureaucracy. She considered throwing it away without reading it, but some part of her needed to see what Marcus had to say from behind bars. "You think you won?" The handwriting was angular, aggressive, pressing hard into the paper. "I have friends. I have connections. This is not over. I will be out in 15 years, maybe 10 if I behave. And when I get out, I will take everything from you. Everything. You will never be safe. You will never stop looking over your shoulder. I made you, Grace, and I will unmake you." There was no signature, just the letter M. Grace read it twice. Then she walked to her home office. On her computer was a file she had been holding on to for months, evidence she had discovered during the investigation, but had not yet shared with prosecutors. Evidence linking Marcus to campaign finance violations involving 3 sitting congressmen. Evidence that could extend his sentence by another decade. She had kept it as protection, a final card to play if Marcus ever found a way to threaten her from behind bars. Now, sitting at her desk with his letter in her hand, she made a decision. She opened her email and began composing a message to the Department of Justice. "Dear Agent Morrison, I have additional information regarding the activities of Marcus Bellamy that I believe may be relevant to ongoing investigations." She attached the file. "He is right about one thing," she said quietly, looking at the letter one last time before dropping it in the trash. "It is not over, but that is not a threat, Marcus." She moved her cursor to the send button. "It is a promise." She clicked send, then she closed the laptop, walked back to the living room, and picked up her daughter. The sun was setting over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink. Grace stood at the window with Lily in her arms, watching the city light up building by building below them. She thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago, the scared, broken woman in the wine-stained dress who had believed she had no power, no options, no way out. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had stared into the darkness and found her own light. Someone who had been told she was worthless and had proven she was worth everything. Someone who had been trapped in a golden cage and had burned it to the ground. "You know something, baby girl?" Grace whispered to her daughter. "Your grandmother used to say that the best revenge is living well. But I think the best revenge is making sure they can never hurt anyone else again." Lily cooed and reached for the fading sunlight. "And the best part? The best part is that we get to be happy now. We get to build a beautiful life together. We get to have birthday parties and beach vacations and lazy Sunday mornings. We get to be free." She kissed her daughter's forehead. "They wanted to break us. They wanted to destroy us. They wanted to take everything we had." She looked out at the city, at the millions of lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering darkness. They failed. The
Aren't they
documentary
doing
about
a
her
new
case aired 3
season
months
in
later.
Dead by
The book deal
Daylight
was signed the
with
month after that.
Stranger
The
Things
foundation helped over 200
in
women in its
January?
first year alone, providing legal support
I
and
think
financial
so.
assistance and safe places to stay when they needed to escape. But none of that mattered as much as this moment, standing in her own home, holding her own daughter, surrounded by friends who had become family.
Yes.
Finally, completely, irrevocably free. To everyone who was told they were not smart enough, Grace said softly, raising an imaginary glass to the window. To everyone who was told they were
Yeah,
worthless.
I thought they was.
To everyone who believed they would never escape. She smiled, and the smile reached all the way to her soul. "You are." Lily laughed, reaching for the stars that
I
were
know
just
one
beginning
damn
to
thing.
appear
I
in the
don't think
darkening
this
sky.
thing would have ever
And
fell
Grace
apart
Bellamy, former
if
trophy
it
wife,
bounced off the
survivor,
fucking
warrior,
floor.
mother, held her daughter close and watched the sun set on the old life she had destroyed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new ways to help other women find their own strength, discover their own power, write their own stories of survival and triumph. But tonight, she was home, and that was more than enough. And that is the story of how a trophy wife became the one holding the trophy. Grace Bellamy was told she was nothing. She was told she existed only because her husband allowed it. She was told she was too stupid, too weak, too worthless to ever fight back. She proved them all wrong. The meaning of this story goes beyond revenge. It is about remembering who you are when someone has spent years trying to make you forget. It is about finding strength in the skills others dismiss. It is about building a sisterhood of women who refuse to let each other fall. And most importantly, it is about this truth. You are stronger than you know. You
So
are
is the
smarter than they
WWE.
think. And you are capable of things you cannot even
What?
imagine right now.
What are you talking about?
If this story touched you, if it inspired you, if it reminded you of your own strength, I have a small request. Hit that like button. Not for me, but for every woman who needs to hear this story and has not found it yet. Your like helps the algorithm
Stranger
share
Things
this
is doing
message
something with them
someone
January
who might
5th.
be sitting in their own golden cage right
In
now,
the WWE?
believing there is no way out. Leave a comment. Tell me your thoughts. Share your own story if you feel comfortable. This community is built on women supporting women, and your voice matters here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. A friend, a sister, a coworker, you never know whose life might change because you press that share button.
Yes.
And if you have not already, subscribe to
gotta
this
be
channel
shitting me.
and ring that notification bell. We post new stories every week. Stories about women who refused to be broken, who found their power, who wrote their own endings. Next week, we have something special. A cheating husband who did not realize his wife secretly owned the company he worked for. Trust me, you do not want to miss that one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. Remember, treat people with kindness, because you never know when the woman you underestimate might just be an accountant with a very good memory. See you in the next one. Final disclaimer. This content has been carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted with intention, designed not just to entertain, but to inspire, empower, and remind you of the strength you carry within. Thank you for trusting us with your time.